Imagine waking up every day, working hard, doing your best, and still feeling like no one notices. No praise, no applause, no recognition, just silence. You start to wonder, does anyone even care? Here's the Stoic truth. No one cares until you win. The world doesn't owe you validation. It doesn't reward effort alone. It responds to results, to discipline, to proof. You can have dreams, talent, and good intentions, but without action, without consistency, without the quiet strength to endure, those things mean nothing. And the Stoics knew this. They didn't complain. They didn't seek attention. They lived with purpose, worked in silence, and let their results speak for themselves. This isn't about bitterness. It's about clarity. When you stop expecting the world to cheer you on, you free yourself. You focus on the work, not the noise. On the process, not the praise. That's where real strength lives. Today, you'll learn the mindset that helped warriors, emperors, and philosophers rise. Not because the world cared, but because they stayed the course when no one was watching. Because you don't need the world to believe in you. You need to believe in yourself and act. So before we begin, write these words in the comments. I choose discipline. Say it with intention. Write it like a promise. Because this isn't just a lesson, it's a challenge. And after this, you won't chase approval. You'll build inner strength. You'll lead yourself. And you'll win, with or without applause. Let's begin. They say you have so much potential. They say you're gifted, talented, intelligent, full of promise. You hear those words and feel something spark inside you. Like maybe they see something real. Like maybe you're on the edge of something great. But deep down, there's a quiet ache, because nothing's happened yet. You're not where you want to be. You've started things, but not finished them. You've had good ideas, but no clear results. You tell yourself, one day I'll prove it. But days keep passing, and the truth gets harder to ignore. Potential doesn't mean anything if you do nothing with it. The world isn't watching your potential, it's watching your progress. This is where we begin. Let's be honest. People care about what they can see. They respect what's measurable. If you say you're a writer, but you've never published anything, they nod politely and move on. If you say you're building a business, but you've been working on it for years with nothing to show, they stop asking about it. Not because they're cruel, because they've heard it before, from 100 other people who never followed through. The harsh reality is this: potential is invisible, proof is not. It doesn't matter how smart you are if no one ever sees you apply it. It doesn't matter how creative you feel if your ideas live and die inside your mind. All the untapped brilliance in the world means nothing without action. This isn't about chasing fame or fortune, it's about integrity between what you say and what you do. When those two don't align, people stop trusting your words. They might still like you, but they won't believe in you. They won't invest in you, because they've learned the hard way that talk is cheap. Even your own self-respect starts to fade when you live in that gap between intention and execution. You feel stuck, not because you lack ability, but because you've been promising yourself change without delivering on it. You get good at dreaming. You get good at planning. You get good at talking about what you could do. If things were different, if the timing was better, if you just had more support. But none of that matters. What matters is what you're doing now. Potential is a spark, but it needs fuel. It needs discipline. It needs repetition. The Stoics knew this. Epictetus once said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." You don't have to convince people you're capable. You just have to live like it. You just have to do the thing day after day, especially when no one's watching. That's what separates people who rise from people who stay stuck. Not talent, not luck. Follow through. You might think you need more motivation, but you don't. You need momentum. Start small, but start. Because the longer you wait, the more your potential turns into a burden. It weighs you down. It becomes this quiet voice in your head that says, "You should be further by now." And that voice can eat away at you. You begin to doubt whether you ever had it in you at all. You wonder if maybe they were wrong about you. But they weren't. What they saw was real. The problem isn't the lack of potential. It's the lack of proof. Now, proof doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't mean you're winning awards or going viral. It simply means you're consistent. You're building something that exists outside of your mind. You're showing your work, even if it's messy, even if it's slow, even if no one's clapping yet. That's where confidence comes from, not from compliments, from evidence. Every action you take is a deposit into your self-belief. Every small win reinforces the truth. You are capable, not in theory. In fact, when you live this way, something shifts. You stop needing people to believe in you because you believe in yourself, and you have proof to back it up. And here's something most people don't realize. When you finally show results, the world will take notice. Not because it suddenly decided to care, but because people trust what they can measure. They trust what they can see. Results are language. They speak for you, loudly. This is why potential can actually become a trap. It makes you feel like you're special without doing anything to earn it. It gives you false comfort. It feeds your ego without challenging your habits. You start to feel successful just by talking about your goals. You post the vision board. You share your ideas. You get a few likes, a few compliments, and that feels like progress. But it's not. It's distraction dressed as validation, and it's dangerous because it tricks your brain into thinking you're already on the path when you haven't even taken the first step. The Stoics warned against this. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. Potential gets wasted in distractions, in daydreams, in conversations that go nowhere. You need to trade potential energy for kinetic energy, movement, effort, output, not just once, but daily. Even when no one's watching, even when the results are slow, even when you feel like a beginner, especially then, because those are the moments that create your foundation. Those are the hours no one talks about later, but they matter most. When you put in the work and there's no feedback, no audience, no reward, just silence. That silence, that's where strength is built. The difference between those who win and those who stay stuck isn't that they had more potential. It's that they kept moving when nothing seemed to be working. They kept showing up when everyone else quit. They built the habit of doing, not just dreaming. And here's something else to consider. The longer you live on potential alone, the more people expect from you, and the more pressure you feel to finally deliver. That pressure can paralyze you. It turns into perfectionism. You start thinking, if I'm going to finally show proof, it better be amazing. But amazing doesn't happen on the first try. It happens after the 100th, after the 1000th. The best work you'll ever do will be built on the back of the worst work you dared to finish. Let that free you. You don't need to be brilliant. You just need to be brave enough to be seen doing the work. People love to romanticize potential, but only when it leads to something real. No one wants to hear about your next big thing for 10 years straight. They want to see version 1, then version 2, then version 20. Because effort is only inspiring when it leads to something. Otherwise, it's just noise. Don't fall into the trap of becoming a person who always almost did something, who had all the right qualities but never turned them into action. That story is everywhere. You were meant for more than that. Your job is not to protect your ego. Your job is to test your limits. Every time you release your work into the world, even if it's not perfect, you sharpen your skills. You gain feedback. You build momentum. You show people and yourself that you're serious. Not in theory, in reality. Because seriousness isn't a mindset. It's a pattern of behavior. You want to be a leader? Then lead. You want to be respected? Then do things worth respecting. You want to be trusted? Then keep your promises, especially the ones you make to yourself. This is what the Stoics meant by virtue. It's not about looking good. It's about doing good, living with intention, acting with purpose, creating something real, even when it's hard. So if you've been stuck in potential mode, if you've been talking more than doing, planning more than building, now is the time to stop. You don't need another motivational video. You don't need more people telling you you're gifted. You need movement. You need to prove, not to others, but to yourself, that you are who you say you are. You don't get that proof by waiting. You get it by choosing action over hesitation, repetition over perfection, progress over pride. When you do this, something incredible happens. You start to trust yourself again. Your words carry weight. Your goals feel possible. Not because you hope they'll happen, but because you're making them happen. That's when the world takes notice. Not before, not when you're still talking about what you could do, but when you've already done it and kept doing it. They won't say you had so much potential. They'll say, you proved it. And that changes everything. Even after proving yourself, even after stepping out of the shadows of potential and finally producing something real, something you can point to and say, I did that, you still notice something unexpected. Silence. No applause, no praise, no open doors. And for a moment, it hits you. All that effort, all those long nights, the discipline, the sacrifices, the choices no one saw, they still didn't notice. You thought doing the work would be enough. You thought proof would be the final key. But now you're learning another hard truth. Effort doesn't guarantee recognition. This is one of the most misunderstood parts of the path. People will tell you to work hard, to grind, to hustle. And yes, that part is necessary. But what they don't tell you is that you can give everything and still go unnoticed. You can put in more hours than anyone else and still get overlooked. You can stay consistent, disciplined, even excellent, and still be underestimated. Because the world doesn't reward effort, it rewards results that are seen, not effort behind the scenes, not promises of how hard you're trying, but outcomes that are visible, measurable, undeniable. That's what people respond to, not how tired you are, not how much you've sacrificed, but what they can actually witness, use, or experience. You could be running a marathon every day in private, and no one will clap until you cross a public finish line. This doesn't mean your effort is meaningless. Far from it. It means you must detach your effort from your need for praise. You must learn to work without recognition, to pour yourself into something without expecting applause. This is where real strength is forged, the kind of strength that doesn't crack under silence. It's easy to feel motivated when everyone's watching, when people are cheering, when you're being celebrated. But that's not discipline, that's reward. And rewards are never guaranteed. What matters more is what you do when no one sees you, what you build when no one is clapping, what you choose when there's no recognition, no spotlight, no feedback. This is where most people quit, not because they lack ability, but because they were secretly depending on external motivation. They were hoping for approval to keep going. But the Stoics taught the opposite. They said, you must do what's right, not because others will praise you, but because you have committed to the path. You act according to principle, not popularity. That's why you must learn to keep moving forward, even in the dark. You have to develop a mindset where the work is the reward, where finishing what you started feels better than being noticed for starting, where your effort doesn't need an audience, because you're not doing it to be seen. You're doing it to become who you said you would be. Recognition is nice, but it's never owed. You don't get a standing ovation just for trying. You get silence, and sometimes even judgment, until the outcome is undeniable. This is what separates the few who rise from the many who stop. They keep going, even when it seems like no one cares. You can work 20 hours a day, build something valuable, pour your soul into your craft, and still go months, even years, with no attention. It doesn't mean the work isn't worth it. It means the world moves on its own timeline. It sees results when it's ready, and when it does, it often acts like you just started, even though you've been at it for a decade. You must be okay with that. You must expect it. Because the truth is, many people are working hard. What makes the difference is how long you can stay patient, stay focused, and stay committed. Even when it feels like no one is watching, even when your effort looks invisible. This doesn't mean you stop pushing for excellence. In fact, it means the opposite. It means you must raise your standard even higher, not for applause, but because your integrity demands it. This is the Stoic path, doing the hard thing, the thankless thing, the quiet thing, because it's what aligns with your principles, because it's what builds character, because it's the only way to get to the level where people finally notice. But until that moment comes, you live in the gap between effort and recognition. And in that gap, many people get bitter. They feel they're being ignored. They start looking at others and thinking, why them and not me? They forget that everyone's journey has hidden parts. They assume visibility equals effort, and they grow resentful. Don't make that mistake. Stay focused on your path. Stay humble. Stay disciplined. Let others post their wins. Let them celebrate loudly. Let them take the stage. You don't need to compete for attention. You need to build something that lasts long after the spotlight fades. Sometimes, your greatest achievements will be met with silence. No headlines, no awards, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing you did what others weren't willing to do. That satisfaction, that internal proof, is more powerful than any applause. Because recognition is fragile. It fades. It depends on others. But inner peace, that stays. That grows stronger with every quiet win. When you train yourself to work without recognition, you become unstoppable, because you no longer depend on things you can't control. You don't get discouraged when your hard work goes unnoticed, because you understand this. The world doesn't owe you recognition. It owes you nothing. And once you accept that, you're free. Free to do the work without distraction. Free to be consistent without needing attention. free to push past your limits without looking for approval. That kind of freedom is rare, and it's what builds people who win in the long run. Effort without recognition also teaches you to love the process, not in a shallow way, but in a deep, committed way. You start to care more about getting better than being seen. You find joy in the craft, not the reaction. You lose the obsession with being noticed and replace it with obsession for being excellent. That shift is powerful, because now you're no longer seeking validation. You're creating value. Quietly, consistently, day after day. And here's what happens when you keep going long enough. Recognition finds you, not when you expect it, not when you think you've earned it, but when your work becomes so good, so undeniable, that people can't ignore it anymore. You won't have to beg for attention. You won't have to explain yourself. The results will speak. The consistency will show. The silence you endured will become the story they tell. They kept going when no one else believed. But until then, you must learn to hold your silence, to protect your energy, to build without needing praise. That's what makes your effort powerful instead of desperate. Because there's a difference between effort that's dependent on recognition and effort that's driven by purpose. One is shaky, always needing applause. The other is steady, rooted in values. Choose the second. Choose the quiet path. Let others chase likes. You chase legacy. Let others work for attention. You work for mastery. Let others count followers. You count reps, pages, hours, products, sessions. The real data that actually moves your life forward. This is how you build momentum that doesn't break. Every time you show up without being noticed, you build a kind of confidence that fame can't give you. You stop measuring your effort by how loud the world responds and start measuring it by how much you grow. That's when everything changes, because now your motivation isn't shallow. It's not tied to likes, praise, or attention. It's tied to your identity, the kind of person you've chosen to become. And you can't fake that. It's built through thousands of invisible hours, through effort that no one sees, through doing the right thing, not the popular thing. The world may not recognize you now, but one day it will. And when it does, it'll seem like you came out of nowhere. Let them think that. You'll know the truth. You didn't show up suddenly, you just never left. Keep going, not for recognition, but for strength, discipline, and peace, the kind that only comes from knowing. You did the work when no one was watching, and you didn't need the world to clap. You only needed to keep your word. You kept going when no one clapped. You built without applause. You worked without needing the spotlight. That kind of discipline changes you. It teaches you to depend only on effort, not attention. But now comes another truth, one that can feel unfair, even frustrating at first. Because while you were working quietly, you probably noticed something else. People treat winners differently. When someone wins, the rules bend. The same behavior that would be criticized in others is overlooked. Flaws become quirks. Mistakes get reframed as bold moves. Attitude becomes confidence. Arrogance is mistaken for leadership. Why? Because winning rewrites the story. This isn't about justice. This is about perception. And in the real world, perception is powerful. Once you win, people look back at your decisions and revise their opinions. Things they once called reckless are now called visionary. The same actions that were questioned before are now considered smart, brave, or even genius. Winning creates its own logic. People don't look at your process. They look at the outcome. If it worked, It must have been right. That's how they think. And this is where many people feel conflicted, because deep inside, you might hope the world rewards fairness, that people get treated based on effort, intention, or integrity. But the world doesn't work that way. It rewards results. And once you have them, everything you did to get there seems justified, even if it wasn't. That's why people who succeed are often allowed to break the rules that would ruin someone else. Not because they're better, not because they're more moral, but because success shifts judgment. The moment you win, people become more forgiving. They stop picking apart your decisions. They stop doubting your talent. They stop questioning your timing. Instead, they follow you. They study you. They copy you. This doesn't mean you should abandon your values or chase victory at any cost, but it does mean you must understand how influence works. If you want to make an impact, if you want to lead, if you want your message to reach more people, you have to earn credibility first. And in most cases, that means proving that your way works. People rarely follow the person who might be right. They follow the person who got it right. Winning is the language they understand. It doesn't matter how many books you've read. It doesn't matter how good your ideas are. If you haven't won in some way, if you haven't created results that others can see, then your voice will always be limited. Not because you're not wise, but because the world listens through the filter of success. That's why the same words spoken by a winner hit harder. The same advice sounds more credible. The same personality traits, confidence, directness, even stubbornness, get labeled as leadership instead of arrogance. Victory gives you the benefit of the doubt. It gives you room to be human. It gives you space to be imperfect. People don't like hearing that, especially those who are still grinding. But the sooner you understand it, the clearer your strategy becomes. It's not enough to be right. You have to prove that being right works. That's the shift. Even when you're telling the truth, people won't listen unless that truth has a track record. And this is where many good, thoughtful people lose momentum. They're honest. They work hard. They try to play fair. But they don't understand the role of results in shaping how others see them. If you want influence, you need to build proof first. Once you have it, the story changes. Even your flaws become easier to accept. People start filling in the blanks with kindness instead of doubt. They say, maybe that was a mistake, but look what they built. Winning becomes a shield. It doesn't make you perfect, but it gives people a reason to believe in your decisions. It makes your past more forgivable and your future more investable. That's why people forgive the arrogance of successful CEOs. That's why artists who once failed are now called ahead of their time. That's why athletes with terrible attitudes are still celebrated, if they win. Because the world doesn't reward character alone. It rewards results that validate the character. You can complain about that, or you can accept it and use it wisely. Not to justify bad behavior, but to understand the game you're in. Because here's the other side of this. When you're losing, the same world is less patient, less forgiving, and less generous. The exact same action that earns praise from a winner might earn scorn from someone still climbing. That's the cost of not winning. Your flaws get magnified. Your ideas get ignored. Your efforts get dismissed. Even your personality can be seen as a problem. Not because it's wrong, but because it hasn't been validated by success yet. So what do you do with this truth? You stop hoping that fairness will carry you. You stop thinking effort alone is enough. You stop expecting people to believe in your process if your process hasn't produced results yet. Instead, you double down on becoming undeniable. You use discipline, not excuses. You aim for execution, not explanation. You take control of the narrative by taking control of the outcome. You don't justify. You produce. You don't defend. You demonstrate. You win, not just for the rewards, but because winning gives your work context. It gives your story shape. It turns your journey into something others can study, follow, and learn from. Winning also builds something deeper: leverage. Leverage means you don't have to explain everything. You don't have to beg for opportunities. You don't have to wait for someone to pick you. You become the person others approach, not because you demanded attention, but because you earned it. That's how you protect your principles. That's how you avoid selling out, not by yelling louder, but by building something so solid they can't ignore it. And once you win, you get space to be more human. You don't have to pretend you have all the answers. You don't have to hide your past. You don't have to soften your voice. You're allowed to be flawed, because now your value is proven. It's not about being perfect, it's about being effective. This is what the Stoics understood so clearly. They knew life wasn't always fair, but they didn't whine about it. They trained for it. They expected it. And they focused on what was within their control, their own actions, their own clarity, their own mindset. They knew that complaining changes nothing. But creating something valuable, that changes everything. When you focus on results, you gain a type of freedom others never experience. The freedom to speak truthfully, the freedom to lead boldly, the freedom to stand tall even when others try to tear you down, because you've already shown what you're capable of. That's what winning gives you, not just praise, but permission. Permission to be bold, permission to be complex, permission to be different. It's not fair, but it's real. And once you understand how the world works, you can stop fighting the rules and start mastering them. So the question is, are you building something that works, or are you still waiting to be discovered? Because no one will understand your flaws, your vision, or your method until you win. They won't connect the dots until the picture is clear, and that picture is built with proof, not potential. If your goal is to be heard, to be trusted, to be followed, then winning must become part of your strategy, not just for personal gain, but for impact. Because your ideas deserve attention. Your work deserves recognition. But none of it matters unless you deliver results that speak louder than your words. That's how you earn respect. That's how you gain influence. That's how you rewrite your story and the way others see it. Winning gives you room to breathe, but the path to victory offers no such kindness. The climb is often cold, quiet, and lonely. Even when you're doing the right things, making the right choices, showing up every single day, there is no guarantee anyone will notice. You expect progress to bring praise, but instead, you meet silence. You hope someone will say, "Keep going," but no voice comes. And this is where many stop. Not because they're tired, but because they feel unseen. What no one tells you is that struggle is supposed to be quiet, that loneliness is not a sign of failure, that the silence isn't proof you're doing it wrong. It's proof you're on the path. It's uncomfortable, but it's not unusual. It's not unfair. It's just how the climb works. When you're grinding, when you're trying to build something real, there's no music playing in the background. There are no cheering fans. No one is following your steps with wide eyes and applause. Most days the world doesn't react, not because it's against you, but because it simply doesn't know you're building, and it's not supposed to. The climb is private. The pain is internal. The fight is yours alone. And that's the lesson. You have to get used to clapping for yourself. You have to be your own support system, your own coach, your own audience. If you only move forward when others notice, you'll stop the moment they don't. You can't rely on encouragement to keep going. Encouragement is a bonus, not a fuel source. If you make recognition the condition for effort, you've already surrendered your power, because encouragement is rare, and it's often too late. It arrives after the win, not during the struggle. People celebrate results. They rarely celebrate progress. Even those closest to you may not understand your path. You'll try to explain what you're doing, how much it means to you, how hard it is, but they won't see it clearly. Not because they don't care, but because the battle isn't theirs. It's yours. They won't see the early mornings, the mental fatigue, the doubt you fight daily. They won't feel the pressure of staying committed when everything around you is uncertain. They might nod politely, but they won't feel the weight, and that's okay. It's not their job to feel it. Your job is to keep going, even in the quiet. The Stoics taught that external things, praise, fame, approval, are not within your control. Therefore, they cannot be the reason you act. If you need noise to validate your effort, you will always be waiting for someone else to push you. But if your actions are rooted in internal principle, you don't wait. You move forward because it aligns with who you are becoming. This is the strength you must build, the ability to take another step, even when it feels pointless. To work hard on something that hasn't yet rewarded you. To believe in the process, even when it gives you nothing back. That's what makes you unshakable. You cannot demand support. Support must be earned. But even when it's earned, it often shows up too late. It shows up after you no longer need it. That's the irony. Once you're standing at the top, people finally want to cheer. But by then, you've learned how to climb without the noise. And that's the real win. Because the ability to move forward in silence is a superpower. It means you're not controlled by feedback. You're not dependent on being seen. You've built a foundation that doesn't break when no one's looking. This matters, because many people stop not due to lack of strength, but due to lack of attention. They think silence means they're on the wrong path. They mistake invisibility for failure. But they forget. Most progress is invisible at first. Seeds grow underground before anyone sees a leaf. Muscles are built long before the transformation is obvious. Confidence is earned in solitude long before it's noticed. Silence is part of the process, not an obstacle, not a punishment, just part of the path. The world doesn't owe you encouragement. The world is too busy, too distracted, too focused on its own noise. You must create your own clarity. You must be willing to walk the road with no audience, no crowd, no celebration. This isn't about suffering. This is about strength. When you accept silence as part of the journey, you stop resisting it. You stop looking over your shoulder, hoping someone's paying attention. You start facing forward, fully focused on your mission. That shift is everything, because once you stop seeking encouragement, you become incredibly powerful. You're no longer fragile. You're no longer held back by the opinions or attention of others. You build momentum that doesn't rely on external conditions. That's what makes you unstoppable. And this is where the Stoic mindset becomes essential. It teaches you to anchor yourself in effort, not approval, to find peace in discipline, not comfort, to trust action over emotion. Because feelings are unstable. One day you feel strong, the next you feel broken. But effort is steady, and it's always available. That's why you must build your days around what must be done, not how you feel about it. Whether you're motivated or not, seen or not, supported or not, you show up. You do the work, not for applause, but for mastery. This is the only way you rise, not because someone told you you're great, but because you proved it, in silence, through effort. And when the world finally looks your way, when the noise arrives, when the compliments start to flow, you'll appreciate them, but you won't depend on them. You'll say thank you, but you won't slow down, because by then you'll know you didn't get here by being celebrated. You got here by continuing when no one saw you. The most powerful people in the world are the ones who know how to survive the quiet, who know how to thrive without applause, who keep building when it feels like nothing is working, because they know something others forget. That silence doesn't mean failure. It means you're early. It means you're planting. It means you're preparing. It means the world hasn't caught up yet, but it will. And when it does, the strength you built in the dark will speak louder than anything you could have said out loud. People will ask how you stayed so focused, how you never quit, how you made it through. And the truth will be simple. You learned how to clap for yourself. Not with arrogance, but with quiet belief. Not with pride, but with presence. Not with noise, but with clarity. You learned how to say, "This matters," even when no one else agreed. You learned how to build your own fire, so you'd never need someone else to light it for you. That's the mindset that carries you forward, through delays, through doubt, through discomfort. Because when the world is silent and you still move forward, you prove something unshakable. You never needed permission. You only needed purpose. Silence teaches you discipline, but judgment teaches you resilience. When the world says nothing, you must encourage yourself. But when the world speaks too loudly, when it criticizes, doubts, or mocks, your strength is tested in a different way. Because failure, unlike silence, does not go unnoticed. It draws eyes, it draws opinions, and rarely, if ever, does it draw kindness. People are quick to analyze failure. They don't ask what it cost you or how much you endured. They look at the outcome and use it to define your worth. The moment you fall, the same people who once cheered start to create distance. They shift the story. They tell themselves, maybe they weren't who we thought. That's how fast loyalty disappears. Failure alone is not respected. It is tolerated at best and ridiculed at worst. People say they support failure, that they value learning, that everyone should be allowed to fall. But in practice, they don't wait for the lesson. They rush to the conclusion. If you don't rise quickly, if your story doesn't wrap up neatly, they lose patience. They stop listening. They treat your pain as a summary, not a chapter. And this is why falling is never enough. The world only begins to shift when you rise. Redemption is what makes people rewrite your history. It's the comeback that makes your downfall look courageous. Without it, the same failure is just seen as proof of weakness. But with it, people begin to revise everything. They say you were strong all along, that they always believed in you, that your loss was part of the plan. This is not bitterness. This is the reality of how human perception works. People love a good ending. They don't know how to hold space for someone still in the middle. If you're still bleeding, still trying, still figuring it out, they turn the page, they move on, and later, if you return stronger, they flip back and reread your story as if they never stopped caring. But you'll remember who vanished, who judged too soon, who laughed or dismissed or minimized your effort, and that memory will sharpen your focus, not out of anger, but clarity. The path to redemption does not start with anyone else's opinion. It starts with your decision to keep going after everything has fallen apart. When the easy thing would be to stop, to hide, to pretend you never tried in the first place. But instead, you choose to rebuild, to try again without applause, to start over while carrying the weight of public failure on your back. That choice is not romantic. It is raw, humbling, often brutal. There is nothing graceful about waking up the day after everything crumbles. You feel exposed. You question your value. You carry shame, not just from the failure itself, but from the way people reacted to it. It stays with you. But if you keep going, step by step, something changes. You begin to shed the version of yourself that depended on approval. You stop explaining. You stop seeking permission. You stop defending your worth through words, and you begin to express it through action, quietly, relentlessly. This is what redemption looks like. Not a big moment, but a series of consistent choices that nobody sees. Waking up early again, starting from zero again, facing doubt again, without asking for sympathy, without announcing every move, without waiting for the narrative to shift. Because it won't shift until you give people a reason to look twice, until you build something they can't ignore, until your results speak louder than the failure that used to define you. Then the revision begins. They'll start saying your story was powerful, that your failure made you wiser, that your journey was inspirational. But all of that only arrives after the fact, not before. That's why you can't wait for it. You have to be willing to walk through the part no one admires, the ugly part, the uncertain part, the chapter that gets skipped until the ending is known. And it may take longer than you think. The world doesn't have a schedule for your comeback. It doesn't owe you a second chance. You have to create it, brick by brick, day by day. That means you may have to carry the label of failure longer than feels fair. You may be judged by your last mistake instead of your next move. You may be underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed for a while. But that's the price of rebuilding. Not everyone will believe in you. Not everyone will forgive your fall. Some will enjoy keeping you in that category. That's their story, not yours. Your job is not to convince them. It's to keep moving until you no longer have to. And while the world may forget the details of how you fell, you will not. You will remember the pain, the silence, the weight. But you will also remember what you discovered in it. That you are not fragile. That you can break and rebuild. That you can face judgment and still find the strength to rise again. Failure, when processed with honesty, does not destroy you. It refines you. It removes illusions. It reveals what matters. It clears the noise. And most importantly, it makes you harder to shake. Because once you've been humbled publicly, once you've had to face the worst-case scenario and survived, there's a kind of courage that grows. The kind that doesn't flinch anymore. The kind that doesn't care what people say because you've already lived through their judgment and kept going. That's what makes redemption powerful. Not the praise that eventually returns, but the strength you gain from walking through the fire without it. When people look back at your story, they will talk about how you bounced back, how you rebuilt, how you rose from nothing. But what they won't see is the patience it took, the hours of invisible work, the days of doubt, the decision to keep showing up despite the weight of failure hanging over your name. And they don't need to. That part wasn't for them, it was for you. It was where you learned that success doesn't erase pain and failure doesn't erase your value. That you are more than any outcome. But outcomes still matter. Because they are how the world understands what you've been through. When you finally rise again, and you will, people will try to define your story. They'll try to package it, to turn it into a lesson, to draw neat conclusions. Let them. That's not your concern anymore. Your concern is becoming someone who doesn't wait for redemption to be given, but someone who earns it quietly, one act of resilience at a time. Because when you return from failure not as a victim, but as a builder, not as someone seeking sympathy, but as someone carrying purpose, you gain something far more valuable than approval. You gain authority, the kind that only comes from lived experience, the kind that no one can fake, the kind that doesn't waver when things fall apart again, because you've already rebuilt once, and you know how. That's the hidden reward of failure. Not the applause that comes after you win again, but the wisdom you carry when no one else is watching. And when others fall, because they will, they'll look to you, not for answers, but for proof that it's possible. That recovery isn't just an idea, but a real path someone walked before them. That's your role now, not just to rise, but to rise in a way that leaves a trail behind. Not to impress the world, but to remind others that failure is not a full stop. It's just a comma in the sentence you haven't finished writing yet. You were judged too soon. That's normal. You were written off too early. That's expected. But now it's your turn. Not to explain, but to build something that makes the judgment irrelevant. Because once you return stronger, no one will care how far you fell. They'll only see how high you climbed back. The comeback earns respect, but respect alone is never enough. Rising from failure is powerful, but in a world that constantly moves, even your redemption has a short shelf life if it doesn't evolve into sustained value. People are quick to celebrate your return, but just as quick to move on when someone new arrives. Someone louder, cheaper, faster, more convenient. That's when another truth surfaces. Being admired is not the same as being needed. In every space you enter, whether it's work, friendships, relationships, or any team, you start as a replaceable part. You may be liked, you may be appreciated, but until your presence fills a gap no one else can fill, your worth stays on a leash. As long as you're easy to swap out, your position is temporary, your voice is optional, your influence is limited. Value, in its purest form, is not about being busy, it's about being necessary. When people realize that what you bring can't be easily duplicated, they start listening differently. They stop comparing you to others. They start protecting your place. But you don't reach that point by doing what everyone else can do. You get there by mastering something they can't ignore. Being indispensable doesn't mean being perfect. It means being reliable at a level where your absence creates a visible gap. That level takes intention. It takes time. It requires you to build skill, consistency, and trust at the same time. And that rarely happens by accident. At first, you're just one of many. That's how most people begin. You show up, you contribute, you do your part. But your real power begins when you stop trying to prove you're good and start making yourself essential. That shift is where everything changes. Essential doesn't mean loud, it means consistent. It means knowing your role so deeply that others stop questioning your presence. It means solving problems before they get big. It means becoming the person others turn to when it matters. Not because they're told to, but because experience has taught them you're the one who delivers. This is how you become the anchor in any room. You build systems no one else sees. You clean up messes before they become visible. You anticipate what's needed and act before being asked. Over time, those actions build trust, and that trust builds security. When people know they can depend on you, not occasionally but always, you shift from being one option to being the only option they want. Until that happens, your spot is temporary, your presence is negotiable, your absence doesn't change anything. That's the danger of blending in. Even if you're good at what you do, you must go further, not to outshine others, but to build a kind of quiet influence that speaks for itself. It's not about being liked. People like many people. Liking is soft. It doesn't anchor you. Being liked is comforting, but it won't protect your seat at the table. Being needed will. To reach that level, you need to choose depth over visibility. Learn what no one else wants to learn. Handle what others avoid. Be the one who can carry the pressure when it matters. And don't ask for credit. Just build your reputation through your actions. Reputation is a long game. It doesn't come from noise. It comes from patterns. People don't remember your best day. They remember your consistency. The person who shows up ready, even when it's hard. The one who doesn't need reminders. The one who takes responsibility without being asked. And this isn't limited to work. This applies in relationships too. If you're replaceable emotionally, mentally, or practically, then people treat you as temporary. It's not personal. It's how human behavior works. People hold on to what adds value and let go of what doesn't change their day-to-day. To be irreplaceable in someone's life, you must show up in ways that matter. Not in dramatic gestures, in daily effort, in emotional reliability, in the kind of presence that steadies, supports, and strengthens the people around you. That kind of connection doesn't get built with words. It gets built with follow-through. You become indispensable when people know that losing you would cost them more than just filling a slot. It means your absence creates problems. Your input changes the outcome. Your work makes things smoother. Your presence brings stability. And there's a freedom in that. Because once you reach that level, you stop competing. You stop chasing validation. You're not trying to prove your value. Your value has already spoken for itself. But getting there takes a mindset shift. You stop asking, "What can I get?" You start asking, "What can I solve?" You stop looking for attention. You start looking for opportunities to carry weight. You stop chasing status. You start creating systems, ideas, solutions, and outcomes that make things better, whether you get noticed or not. And then something happens. People notice anyway. Not because you asked, but because they realize they don't function the same without you. That's when your value is no longer debated. That's when your voice carries weight. Being indispensable is not about being the star. It's about being the one who holds things together when others hesitate. It's not about needing to be seen. It's about being the person they look for when it's time to get things done right. And here's the truth no one talks about. In most environments, people are quick to cut what they don't miss. They remove the nice-to-haves when pressure hits. They protect the essentials. You have to make yourself uncuttable, not by being louder, but by being more useful. That starts with knowing what matters most in the space you're in. What does this team, this business, this relationship actually depend on? Learn that. Master that. Then go further. Find the gaps. Fill them. Do the work no one else is willing to do, not for recognition, but because you understand that value is built where others look away. You must train yourself to see what others ignore, to act without waiting, to take responsibility for the bigger picture, even when it's not assigned to you. That's what builds authority. People don't trust titles. They trust consistency. They trust who shows up when the pressure spikes, who thinks clearly when things fall apart, who finishes the job even after the energy is gone. You build that trust with repetition, not with talk, not with confidence, with action, over and over, until it becomes your identity. And when that happens, you shift from being just another option to being the one they rely on. That's when your value becomes undeniable. That's when you earn leverage. That's when people don't want to imagine moving forward without you. Not because you demand it, but because you've proven it. This kind of positioning doesn't come quickly. It takes years, but once it's earned, it creates long-term security. It gives you space to speak with more clarity. It allows you to lead. It builds freedom within the system, because now your worth is tied to actual outcomes, not politics. And with that comes responsibility. Once you're essential, your absence creates waves. So don't let your value become stagnant. Keep growing, keep sharpening, keep improving the systems you built. Don't stop once you're needed. Become harder to replace with every passing year, not through pressure, but through evolution. Keep expanding your skill set. Keep building relationships. Keep mentoring others so you create more impact. The more you grow, the more stable your position becomes. And if you're not there yet, that's okay. That's the point of growth. Every action you take today, every quiet improvement, every unnoticed solution, every extra step brings you closer. You don't need to be irreplaceable today, but you need to be building toward it every single day, without waiting for someone to tell you it's time. Because when your value becomes undeniable, the conversation changes. You no longer worry about being kept. You become the person they build around, not out of pity, not out of loyalty, but out of need. And in a world where attention shifts fast and options are endless, being needed is everything. Earning your place, making yourself essential, it demands consistency that doesn't waver. You don't become indispensable by showing up strong once in a while. It's the repeated actions, the small decisions made when no one's watching, that separate those who are valuable from those who are vital. And the truth is, you can't depend on how you feel to guide you there. Feelings shift, energy fades, life gets loud, but the work must still get done. Motivation might get you started, but only discipline keeps you in motion. And this is where most people stall. They wait for the spark. They wait for the right mood, the perfect moment, the inner push. They think, I'll go harder when I feel more ready. But readiness isn't consistent. Discipline is. You don't win by feeling great. You win by showing up when you don't. The people who grow, the ones who lead, build and finish what they start, are not always the most inspired. They're simply the most reliable. And reliability is not a product of passion. It's the result of structure. Discipline gives your days shape when your emotions try to pull you in every direction. Discipline is the system you fall back on when motivation disappears, which it always does. Because motivation is a state. Discipline is a habit. Motivation asks you how you feel. Discipline tells you what to do. And that's the difference. Discipline doesn't care if you're tired. It doesn't ask if you're in the mood. It doesn't check the weather or your inbox. It simply says, this is the work. Do it. That voice, the disciplined one, is the foundation of real freedom, because it builds a life you can trust, a body you can count on, a mind that doesn't cave in at the first sign of discomfort. Motivation will abandon you the moment life gets hard. Discipline stays. If you're serious about your goals, you can't build around a feeling that's not guaranteed to show up. You have to build around action. That means routines that don't ask permission, commitments that don't negotiate, choices that are made ahead of time. You don't wait to feel like it. You simply honor the plan. And the more you do this, the less emotion you need to move forward. You no longer need to hype yourself up to follow through. You just do it because it's who you've become. This is the core of a Stoic life. Acting with consistency, no matter how chaotic the world becomes. When others break under pressure or quit because they lost their drive, you remain. Not because it's easy, but because you've trained yourself to act without needing to be pushed. When you base your progress on motivation, you set yourself up for inconsistency. You'll work hard on the days when things feel exciting, and you'll retreat when it doesn't. That kind of rhythm creates gaps, and gaps lead to decay. Progress dies slowly when you stop showing up. But discipline is the bridge that carries you over those empty days. When there's no energy, no buzz, no adrenaline, you still complete the task. You still lift the weight. You still make the call. Because you already decided long ago that the work would happen, with or without motivation. That decision, repeated over time, creates compound results. Because discipline doesn't just keep you steady, it increases your capacity. It makes you stronger, more focused, more reliable. It allows you to build things that last. There's no passion that can replace the value of repetition. Mastery is not found in bursts of inspiration. It's found in the daily grind, the early hours, the ignored distractions, the disciplined silence of people who work while others scroll. Discipline is where real growth happens, not because you feel unstoppable, but because you keep showing up while you don't. There is nothing glamorous about it. Most disciplined people are not loud. They don't broadcast their routines. They simply keep showing up, every day, without fail, and over time, those quiet efforts grow into something loud, results that speak for them. The irony is that once you build discipline, motivation starts showing up more often, not because your feelings suddenly become stronger, but because your actions have created momentum. And momentum feeds motivation, not the other way around. If you keep waiting for motivation to lead you, you will always fall behind. Because someone out there, less excited than you, more tired than you, more distracted than you, is still putting in the reps. Not because they want to, but because they said they would. That's power. To choose action even when comfort is available. To stay committed even when distraction is easier. That's the kind of discipline that separates leaders from talkers, builders from dreamers. And you don't need to be perfect to be disciplined. You don't need to be extreme. You need to be consistent. You need to keep your promises, especially when no one's watching. That means waking up when it's inconvenient, finishing the workout when you want to stop, writing when you feel blocked, practicing when you're bored, continuing when there's no applause. Discipline is not a trait, it's a system. It's a set of rules you create for yourself, rules you choose to follow no matter what. Not because someone's making you, but because you've decided that honoring those rules is the fastest path to freedom. And freedom matters. Because when you live without discipline, life controls you. Your day gets hijacked by urgency. Your emotions decide how far you go. You say yes to too much, and you stop when it gets hard. You chase short-term relief at the cost of long-term gain. But when discipline runs your life, you're in control. You do what matters first. You make space for what counts. You stop relying on willpower and start building patterns. Even when things fall apart, you stay grounded, because your habits hold you steady. This kind of life is not for everyone. Most people want easy results. They want shortcuts. They want balance without sacrifice. But nothing long-lasting is built that way. If you want real progress, the kind that transforms your life, it will require structure. It will require effort when you feel empty. It will require silence when you want praise. And most of all, it will require the discipline to act without feeling like it. That's why discipline wins every time. It outlasts mood swings. It outperforms inspiration. It works when everything else breaks. Motivation might start the fire, but only discipline keeps it burning. If you want to lead, to build, to rise, stop waiting to feel ready. Start creating routines that hold you accountable. Start following through on your non-negotiables. Start treating your word like law. Because when discipline runs your day, success stops being a question of chance. It becomes a matter of time. When your days are built on discipline instead of feelings, something deeper begins to change. You stop negotiating with yourself. You become someone others can count on. And yet, even with all that internal strength, you may still find yourself misunderstood, overlooked, or judged too quickly. Because no matter how consistent you are, the world doesn't always respond to effort or discipline right away. It responds to outcomes. Perception is shaped by results. That's the uncomfortable truth. People see what works and build their opinions around it. It doesn't matter if your methods are strange, your personality is sharp, or your past is full of missteps. Once you win, those same traits are viewed through a different lens. Victory reframes everything. You can be labeled difficult until your ideas succeed. Then suddenly, you're called driven. You can be called cold until your team starts winning. Then people say you're focused. You can be ignored for years. And then, in one moment of success, your entire story gets rewritten as genius. This isn't just about the outcome. It's about how people assign meaning after the fact. When you win, people stop looking at your flaws as weaknesses. They start calling them part of the process. The same decisions they doubted become strategic in hindsight. The risks they once warned you about turn into bold moves. Winning changes the way others explain your journey. Before that point, you're just someone with opinions, someone with ideas, someone with strange routines or unusual habits, and they question you. They question your motives, your attitude, your direction. But when the result comes, they shift. Suddenly they say you were just thinking ahead. This is why perception is not always about truth. It's often about timing. It's about when people see your results and how that result colors everything you did before. That's why the most misunderstood people are often just a few steps away from being respected. They haven't changed. Their scoreboard just hasn't caught up yet. But this also explains why staying consistent matters more than ever. Because until you win, your methods will be doubted. Your confidence may be mistaken for arrogance. Your intensity might be labeled aggressive, and your silence might be seen as weakness. But the second your actions produce undeniable outcomes, all those traits become assets. People want to believe they understand greatness, but in reality, they only recognize it after it's confirmed. That confirmation is your results, not your effort, not your intention, not even your integrity. It's what they can measure, what they can point to, what they can explain to others. So if you feel like the world misreads you, stay the course. Let your results speak the language they understand. You don't have to argue your way into understanding. You just have to keep building, keep doing the work, keep making progress, even when your character is being questioned. Because when the results arrive, the narrative shifts. People forget the doubts they had. They rewrite your history in a way that fits your victory. And they won't admit they once didn't believe in you. They'll just say they always knew. Winning doesn't just change your life. It changes the story people tell about your life. Even the moments you regret will be reframed. The mistakes that once felt humiliating will be called lessons. The setbacks will be seen as necessary. All because the ending makes sense now. You don't have to like this. but you do need to understand it. Because when you do, you stop chasing validation and start focusing entirely on execution. You stop over-explaining and start over-delivering. You stop trying to win people over and start building things that win by default. The ones who win consistently are rarely those with perfect personalities or clean stories. They're the ones who finished what they started, the ones who outlasted doubt, the ones who kept moving forward while being misread, misjudged, or overlooked. That kind of strength comes from knowing that people's opinions are temporary, but your actions are permanent. Their words change with your wins, but your work stands no matter what they say. When you prioritize the work over the reaction, you stop getting pulled into emotional distraction. Winning brings alignment between what you know about yourself and what the world finally admits. Until then, you live in the gap, that frustrating place where you're working every day to prove what you already know internally, that you are capable, that your vision is real, that your path is valid. The Stoic mindset teaches you to endure that space, to keep showing up even when your reputation doesn't match your ability, to keep pushing forward even when people don't yet see the full picture. You don't need them to see it early, you just need them to see it eventually. Because once you win, the same people who doubted you will point to your traits as the reason you succeeded. They will say, "Of course it worked. Look how focused they were. Look how unshakable. Look how disciplined." But before that, they said those traits were too much. This is why you don't chase public approval. You chase outcomes that change public thinking. The longer you spend explaining your approach, the less energy you have to execute it. And the only thing that reshapes perception is execution. Winning is the great interpreter. It translates your intentions into something others can finally understand. Not because you said it well, but because you proved it. This is the leverage winning gives you. Not just more opportunity, but more control over your own story. You don't have to fight to be understood anymore. You've earned the right to be heard. And this extends beyond personal validation. It affects everything. People give more chances to winners. They listen longer. They forgive faster. They invest more freely. The benefit of the doubt is always extended to the one with a track record. Even their silence is treated as wisdom. This is not about ego. This is about effectiveness. You can be kind and humble and patient. But if there are no results, your voice doesn't carry. The strength of your message depends on the strength of your evidence. And in the world's eyes, winning is evidence. So build your strategy around this understanding. Know that your character should never depend on perception. But your impact? That depends on what the world believes about what you've built. And they won't believe until they see it. That's reality. You don't change that by explaining better. You change it by winning louder. That doesn't mean loud in volume. It means loud in clarity, loud in effectiveness, loud in consistency, loud in precision. When your results speak clearly, the world stops asking for context. They accept what works. They follow what's proven. This is why you have to stay quiet during the climb. Let people misread you. Let them get it wrong. Let them doubt. Because your win will say what you couldn't. And once that happens, the game changes. The conversations shift. The tone adjusts. You gain space to operate on your terms. Because when you win, you don't just get recognition. You gain authority. The kind that makes people question their own assumptions. The kind that rewrites how your past is understood. And the kind that makes everything you endured before feel worth it. Not because they finally said you were right, but because you never needed them to. You just needed to finish what you started, and once you did, they had no choice but to see it. After your results finally speak loud enough to shift how others see you, it feels like the hard part is over. Your name carries weight, your actions are remembered, and your wins shape how people speak about your past. But then, in the middle of all that progress, another truth shows up. A truth that cuts through even the highest levels of success. Being right doesn't always mean you'll win. You can have the facts. You can have the better idea. You can be morally clear, logically sound, even emotionally grounded, and still walk away empty-handed. Because truth is not the only currency that moves the world. Timing, communication, and perception shape outcomes more than most people want to admit. Many believe that correctness will carry them, that if they just stick to what's true, things will fall into place. But life rarely rewards truth by itself. In debates, business, leadership, or even relationships, being right is not always the decisive factor. What matters is how the truth is presented, when it is delivered, and whether the other side is even ready to hear it. If you're not careful, truth can become a trap. You may cling to it as your reason for not adapting. You might refuse to adjust your tone, your timing, or your approach because you're right. But stubbornness in the name of truth doesn't always move things forward. Sometimes it isolates you. Being right can give you clarity, but not always influence. It can help you feel confident, but it doesn't guarantee others will see it your way. That's why execution matters, because the best ideas in the world can die in the hands of people who don't know how to communicate them. You need more than knowledge. You need to be understood. You need to deliver your truth in a way that fits the moment, the audience, and the environment. That doesn't mean diluting your values. It means understanding the terrain you're in. Truth with no strategy is like having a map and refusing to follow the roads. This is where many talented people fall short. They speak up with the right answers, but at the wrong time. They push solutions without understanding the context. They lead with knowledge, but forget about connection. And when it doesn't land, they blame others for not being ready. But readiness is part of the game. If you want to lead with truth, you must also lead with awareness. Who is listening? What are they afraid of? What assumptions do they carry? What language do they respond to? Because if your truth never lands, it never leads. And if it never leads, it never wins. That doesn't make your truth less real. It just makes it ineffective. In every field, there are people with less talent, but more influence. People with fewer facts, but better timing. People with less depth, but sharper instincts. And they win. Not because the world is unfair, but because they understood something others didn't. That winning is not just about being correct. It's about being effective. Stoicism teaches you not to waste energy on what you can't control. You can't force others to see what you see. You can't drag people into awareness. What you can do is learn how to speak truth in a way that moves the needle, not just your ego. Sometimes that means saying less. Sometimes it means waiting longer. Sometimes it means focusing more on action than explanation. Because people don't always listen to what's right. They follow what feels real. And what feels real is shaped by emotion, trust, and relevance. You may be right, but if no one connects with you, the truth stays locked inside your mind. That's why self-awareness is as important as clarity. If your truth is falling flat, the answer isn't to shout louder. It's to listen deeper, to understand the emotional terrain of those you're trying to reach, to meet people where they are, not where you wish they were. You're not dumbing things down, you're being strategic. Strategy is not manipulation. Strategy is the art of placing truth where it will grow. If you're trying to plant a seed, the soil matters. It's the same in every high-stakes situation. Whether you're pitching an idea, offering advice, making a stand, or defending your position, delivery shapes impact. Tone matters. Timing matters. The mood of the room matters. You don't have to control all of it, but you do have to read it. People don't follow truth in isolation. They follow those who carry it with presence, with wisdom, with timing. That's why leadership is hard. It's not enough to know what's right. You have to translate it, package it, make it accessible. You have to earn the space to speak before you unload what you think they should hear. If you skip that part, you'll be right and still get ignored. You'll have the better argument and still lose the room. You'll make sense logically, but lose connection emotionally. And in many areas of life, emotion wins more than logic. The one who creates trust gets heard. The one who creates momentum gets followed. The one who creates safety gets chosen. Truth without empathy comes across as pressure. Truth without timing comes across as arrogance. Truth without clarity becomes noise. This isn't about hiding your beliefs. It's about delivering them like a craftsman, not a wrecking ball. Because if your truth burns bridges, you'll stand alone with your correctness and nothing else. Winning doesn't ask if you were right. It asks if you made things work. And many times, what works is a blend of truth, patience, flexibility, and precision. That balance doesn't come naturally. It's built through failure, through noticing what fell flat, through studying what moved people, through learning from moments where being right still didn't get you what you needed. That awareness builds wisdom, and wisdom is what makes your truth land with weight instead of resistance. This is especially true in leadership. You may have the clearest vision, the most honest analysis, or the most accurate plan, but if you don't bring people with you, you'll be right and alone. That's not victory. That's frustration disguised as virtue. You have to know when to speak and when to wait, when to challenge and when to listen, when to push and when to let people catch up. If you ignore that rhythm, your truth will feel like a lecture instead of leadership. So yes, stand by your truth. Never trade it for approval, but also learn how to carry it, how to deliver it, how to time it. Because when truth is delivered with wisdom, it doesn't just sound right, it feels right. And that's when people move. You don't win by being loud. You win by being precise. You don't win by being correct first. You win by staying correct long enough for others to see it. Sometimes, the best way to prove your truth is not to argue. It's to build something that shows what you meant all along. Let people see the impact. Let them feel the result. Let the truth unfold at its own pace. And in time, the very same people who once dismissed your words will quote them back to you. That's the long game. And that's what makes your truth durable. Because being right is not the end. It's just the beginning. What happens next depends on how you carry it. Precision matters. Delivering the truth with strategy separates leaders from those who merely speak. But even strategy alone cannot carry you across the distance required to reach mastery. At some point, strategy must become obsession. Not the casual kind, not the popular version of being passionate, but real, consuming, focused intensity that rewires how you think, live, and work. This is where the shift happens, and many fall off. Because obsession has a cost, and most people are not willing to pay it. To reach a level that few ever do, you must be willing to think in ways few ever will. That means building your life around one thing and not apologizing for it. It means letting your focus distort the rest of your world, not out of neglect, but out of clarity. You stop chasing balance and start chasing excellence. And in the process, you will be misunderstood. People will say you're extreme. They will call you too serious, too intense, too isolated. They'll ask why you care so much, why you don't relax more, why you always push. But you'll know something they don't, that greatness is not built through moderation. It is built through obsession. Real obsession doesn't burn out. It burns through obstacles. It sees the road and keeps walking, even when no one else sees why you're still going. It doesn't need reminders or motivation. It's not an emotional wave. It's a deep internal fire that doesn't stop when things get uncomfortable. It grows stronger the more pressure you apply. Winners are often called unbalanced because their priorities don't match what's common. They miss events, skip downtime, and structure their lives differently. It's not because they dislike people or pleasure. It's because they value their purpose more. When your vision is sharp enough, everything else blurs. You don't lose sight of what matters, you narrow it. This narrowing changes your environment. You stop fitting into every room. You stop saying yes to everything. You become selective with your time, your energy, your conversations. Not because you think you're better, but because you know what you're building requires everything. Obsession simplifies your decisions. You don't waste time debating priorities. You don't need to convince yourself every day. You've already decided. The work comes first. The goal shapes your calendar, your habits, your choices. You don't feel restricted by that. You feel freed by it. Because indecision is exhausting, but obsession clears the fog. You know what needs to be done. You know what you're willing to sacrifice. You're no longer split between multiple outcomes. You're chasing one, and you're chasing it fully. And that kind of focus is rare, because obsession doesn't tolerate distractions. It doesn't allow excuses. It doesn't wait for the perfect moment. It builds momentum even in chaos. It keeps moving through resistance. When others stop for comfort, you keep building. When they celebrate too early, you keep refining. When they change paths after a setback, you stay on course. Not because you lack options, but because you've already chosen one, and obsession makes that choice unshakable. This doesn't mean you ignore everything else. It means you give your main priority the weight it deserves. It means your goal isn't just something you pursue, it's something you structure your life around. The people who change industries, redefine standards, and create movements are never casual about their work. They don't treat it as a task. They treat it as a calling. And that difference shows up in every detail. They don't need deadlines to move. They don't need reminders to stay on track. They've built a world inside themselves that pulls them forward, no matter what the world outside does. That pull is obsession. It's not always loud. It's often quiet, steady, deliberate. It doesn't need to perform. It just needs to continue. That's what makes it so powerful. Because while others fade, switch goals, or get distracted, obsession keeps digging. And depth is where mastery lives. When you go deep enough into something, you stop relying on hype. You move into rhythm. You no longer work in bursts. You operate with consistency. Your obsession becomes invisible on the surface, but undeniable in your results. That's why people think winners are lucky. They see the outcome but not the years of repetition, the isolation, the missed moments, the single-minded drive. They think success happened fast because they didn't notice what was happening when it was slow. They didn't see the 4 a.m. mornings, the weekends sacrificed, the quiet grind that happened after everyone else stopped. They didn't see the hundreds of days where nothing worked, but the work never stopped. That's what obsession looks like. It's not a mood, it's a standard. You hold yourself to a level that no one else asks of you. You build beyond what's necessary. You double-check when others say it's done. You study when others celebrate. You keep going when others lose interest. And people will ask why. They won't understand at first, because most people view work as something to manage, not something to merge with their identity. But you're not building something casual. You're building something rare, and rare things take rare effort. Obsession creates focus. Focus creates progress. Progress compounds. That's the chain. That's the difference. And you can't fake it. You either care enough to continue, or you don't. So don't be afraid of being misunderstood. Don't tone down your intensity to fit into rooms that don't match your ambition. Don't apologize for your pace, your boundaries, your commitment. You're not here to be average. You're here to build something exceptional. And that takes obsession, not sometimes, every time. When you accept this, your life changes. You stop explaining your choices to people who aren't building what you're building. You stop comparing your path to others. You stop waiting for permission to go all in. You just go, because you know that the world doesn't reward the one who starts fast. It rewards the one who never stops. And that's what obsession gives you. The ability to stay when others leave, to work when others rest, to push when others plateau. And the deeper your obsession goes, the clearer everything becomes. You don't chase every new opportunity. You measure it against your mission. You say no with confidence. You guard your time like it's sacred. Because it is. Every hour spent on something that doesn't serve your obsession is a step backward. That's not selfish. That's strategic. If it doesn't align, it doesn't belong. That's the mindset that builds things people remember. Not for how balanced you were, but for how committed you were, for how relentlessly you chased the thing that mattered. Not because it was easy, but because it was yours. Obsession creates clarity, but it also creates distance. The more you care, the more you narrow your world. You start turning down distractions, removing noise, and protecting your focus like your life depends on it. But the deeper you go, the more you notice something else. Conversations feel different. Social moments feel distant. People stop asking where you've been. They assume you've changed. And in a way, you have. Because mastery has a cost most don't expect until they're already paying it. That cost is isolation. Solitude isn't something you choose once. It's something that grows the more serious you become. Not because you dislike people, but because mastery is not a group activity. It's built in the quiet, away from attention, far from comfort. While others connect over ease, you begin to drift toward challenge. While they prioritize balance, you focus on building depth. This shift isn't dramatic at first. It starts small. You stop attending every social event. You stop engaging in conversations that drain you. You lose interest in things that used to feel exciting. What used to bring you energy now feels like interference. And soon, you find yourself alone more often. Not because you're forgotten, but because you're choosing a path most people won't understand. Mastery demands that you go where others can't follow, that you build your thoughts in silence, that you practice without applause, that you examine your flaws without deflection. These aren't activities for crowds. They require stillness. They require repetition. They require your full attention without distraction. In that space, your understanding deepens. You see patterns others miss. You make connections that seem invisible to everyone else. But with that insight comes the loneliness of distance. Because once you start seeing differently, you start feeling differently. You try to explain, but your words don't land. Not because they're wrong, but because they don't match the rhythm of the room. And this is where many turn back. Not because the work is too hard, but because being alone in your growth can feel unbearable. You look around and realize you're no longer in sync with the people who once felt close. Their pace, their values, their priorities, they've stayed the same while yours shifted. But this is not failure. This is the price of doing something meaningful. When your goals elevate, your circle often doesn't come with you, and it's not out of malice. It's just that people who don't carry your vision won't carry your urgency. They won't understand why you say no more often, why your days are structured differently, why your life is built on discipline instead of comfort. You're not supposed to be understood during this phase. Mastery is not designed to be relatable. It's a level of focus and repetition that most avoid. It's not about being better than anyone. It's about demanding more from yourself than others would ever ask. That kind of internal standard isn't shared. It's earned, and it's earned alone. You wake up with your own plans. You correct your own mistakes. You practice with no audience. You stay committed without someone checking in. This self-reliance builds a different type of strength. The kind that doesn't need motivation, validation, or reminders. The kind that stays solid in silence. Isolation reveals whether your goals are real. If you're only committed when others are watching, you'll fall apart when the room is empty. But if your commitment deepens in solitude, you've found something worth keeping, because the highest level of growth is internal, and that kind of growth can't be shared until it's complete. When you give yourself fully to something, you lose pieces of what made you comfortable. You stop chasing entertainment. You start craving progress. You stop needing noise. You start valuing stillness. You don't feel the need to explain your journey. You just live it. And the more you live it, the more distant you become from those who never chose this path. That's the paradox. You grow in solitude, but that growth can separate you. People may think you've withdrawn, but what's really happening is expansion. You're building something beyond the surface, something rooted, something sharp, and that kind of growth requires room to breathe, room that social clutter often suffocates. It's not about isolating yourself out of bitterness. It's about protecting the space that allows your skills, your mindset, your vision to evolve. It's about recognizing that not every conversation deserves your attention. Not every relationship serves your goals. Not every distraction is harmless. There's nothing wrong with connection, but connection without alignment slows you down. When your daily life is filled with people who don't share your direction, their energy dilutes yours. Not intentionally, but consistently. That dilution spreads. It softens your focus. It pulls your vision sideways. You must be willing to step back to see forward, to spend time with your thoughts until they sharpen, to work without explaining, to listen more than you speak, to live in the gap between where you are and where you're going, without needing someone else to fill the space. And eventually, that silence becomes useful. It stops feeling empty and starts feeling focused. You stop fearing being alone and start choosing it, because it's in that solitude that your best work happens. The ideas you couldn't hear through noise finally surface. The discipline you couldn't maintain in company finally holds. The clarity you were chasing begins to form. People often think greatness is born from energy, talent, or opportunity. But it's often born from distance. from stepping away long enough to fully see, from removing yourself just enough to rebuild yourself. This is why the best work feels different. It was shaped in solitude. It carries a depth that can't be faked. It was built by someone who stayed when others left, someone who trained when no one clapped, someone who chose purpose over attention. Isolation forces you to face your patterns, your weaknesses, your inconsistencies. There's no hiding when you're alone, but that's what makes it valuable, because once you've confronted yourself in silence, you become impossible to manipulate in noise. You've seen what it takes. You've survived the absence of applause. You've learned how to continue without confirmation. That internal power cannot be taken from you. When you return to the world, you return with substance, not empty confidence, earned conviction. You don't need to dominate the room. You've already built your foundation. You speak less, but every word carries more. You move slower, but every step lands harder. You lead without effort because you've led yourself first. That's the outcome of isolation done right. Not loneliness, not confusion, but strength, focus, mastery. And mastery will always demand solitude. Not forever, but long enough to change you, long enough to clear the noise, long enough to make you see that the grind was never meant to be shared step by step. Only the outcome is. So protect your space. Choose your silence. Let go of the need to be constantly surrounded. The work you're doing now may look invisible to the world, but that's exactly what makes it powerful. Because when it's time to return, you won't come back looking for validation. You'll come back with results, and the world will finally see what the silence was building. Solitude sharpens your edge, but even the deepest focus eventually demands results. The world doesn't wait forever to understand your process. It loses interest when the outcome never comes. At first, they admire your grind. They respect the silence. They nod at your discipline. But over time, if the silence doesn't lead to something visible, the world begins to drift. Attention moves. Support fades. And no matter how noble your journey once looked, the patience people had starts running thin. No one says it out loud. It happens subtly. You stop getting checked on. You stop being mentioned. You stop being expected to show up. The energy around your name weakens. People shift their attention to new stories, faster progress, fresher headlines. And if you're still in the struggle, still figuring it out, still deep in the work, it can feel like you've been erased. The truth is, people only root for the underdog as long as they believe a comeback is coming. They support you when they think you're close to turning the page. When the comeback takes too long, that support becomes silence. Not because they're cruel, but because they're human. People want resolution. They want arcs. They want to say they supported someone who made it, not someone who stayed stuck. So when your climb slows, when your story stays unfinished, they begin to doubt. Not always publicly, but internally, they start shifting belief elsewhere, to someone with momentum, someone with proof, someone who looks like they might actually win. That's how the cycle works. The underdog story is only exciting when it moves. When it drags on, it becomes background noise. Attention is limited, and people don't waste it on someone who can't seem to break through. This is harsh, but it's real, and it's why you can't build your strength on external belief. Because when it fades, and it will, you need something stronger than other people's hope. You need your own fire. You need to continue moving, even when the world stops watching. The underdog status might feel empowering at first. It gives you drive. It makes you want to prove something. But over time, it can become a trap. You start relying on the identity of being underestimated. You find comfort in being overlooked. You tell yourself the struggle is the point, but that's only part of the story. Struggle must lead somewhere, otherwise it becomes stagnation in disguise. If you stay down too long, your effort gets mistaken for failure. Your potential turns invisible. Your story stops growing. And eventually, people stop waiting. You become a name they used to believe in, a dream they quietly let go. That's why you need to move with urgency, not panic, but purpose. You don't have forever to figure it out. You can't keep saying, "I'm working on it," year after year with no shift in direction. People need to see change. You need to see change. Not because you're rushing, but because time is passing and energy is limited. Progress doesn't have to be public, but it has to be real. The world is flooded with stories. Everyone is starting something. Everyone is building. Everyone is climbing. If you're not moving, you're fading. If you don't evolve, you disappear. That's the truth most people avoid. They think effort is enough. They think struggle makes them noble. But struggle without results becomes background noise in a loud world. You can be working harder than everyone you know, but if you never finish, never launch, never level up, the effort becomes invisible. And here's where it gets difficult. The longer you stay in the underdog role, the harder it becomes to switch out of it. You start getting attached to the sympathy. You start finding comfort in being doubted. You stop aiming to win and start aiming to prove you're trying. That mindset is heavy, and it keeps you stuck. You don't need to be rescued. You need to rise. And rising doesn't require everyone's support. It requires focus, action, and the refusal to accept unfinished chapters as the end of your story. Don't get addicted to almost. Don't start building an identity around almost making it. Let go of the idea that being underestimated is a permanent position. You're not here to stay overlooked. You're here to win. That means making decisions that move the story forward, not repeating the same plans for years, not telling yourself the same comforting narrative, but stepping out, shipping the product, taking the shot, ending the waiting phase, and entering the proving phase. Every underdog has a window, and inside that window, you have to make something happen. Otherwise, the world writes you off. You become a forgotten name in a sea of other nearly there stories. This doesn't mean rushing your work. It means respecting the time you have. It means using every day as a tool, not a placeholder. It means breaking the loop of perfection and stepping into the real world where results matter. You need momentum. Even small wins matter. Every step forward buys you more belief, from yourself and from others. Every completed task, every improved version, every honest decision gets you closer to relevance. Because people pay attention to movement. They watch traction, they support momentum, and if you don't give them something to believe in soon, they'll find someone else who does. It's not about chasing applause, it's about not becoming forgettable. You've seen it happen. People who had so much talent, so much promise, but they waited too long. They played it too safe. They stayed quiet, kept building, kept preparing, and the world moved on. Don't let that be you. The underdog phase is supposed to be temporary. It's a launch pad, a spark, a beginning, but you have to transition out of it. You have to create the win. The first win might be small, but it's enough to signal that you're moving. And that's all people need. A signal. You don't have to be finished. You just have to be real. You just have to show that the silence wasn't for nothing, that the grind led to something, that the delay wasn't a dead end. Otherwise, the narrative writes itself without your input. And once you lose control of the story, it's hard to get it back. You want people to keep watching? Then give them a reason. Not with words, not with promises, but with progress. Even if it's quiet, even if it's slow. Show the shift. Show the next step. Break the cycle of endless effort with visible evolution. That's how you keep the story alive. That's how you keep the world connected to your journey. And most importantly, that's how you keep yourself from forgetting why you started. Because if you stay the underdog for too long, you stop believing in the comeback. And the moment that belief fades, the climb ends. Don't let your story die in the middle. Turn the page, win something, move forward, and let the world know you're not stuck. You're just getting started. The moment you break through, when people finally begin to notice, the noise returns. They cheer for you. They repost your work. They say they always knew. But what you quickly realize is this: the celebration comes late, much later than it should. The praise only starts after the struggle is mostly behind you. By the time the spotlight turns in your direction, you've already walked miles in the dark. Public praise is never the beginning. It's the echo of what's already been done. It arrives after the grind, after the setbacks, after the internal battles no one saw. People celebrate the outcome, not the process. They react to what's visible, not what was invisible for so long. And if you're not prepared for that delay, it can break your focus. Because if you rely on praise to keep going, you'll stop before it ever comes. You must understand this from the beginning. Applause is not proof of progress. It's a delayed response to proof. And in most cases, it's slow to arrive. That's why you can't build your motivation on recognition. You'll quit too early. You'll question yourself every time the world stays silent. You'll shrink your vision to fit what gets attention now. But growth doesn't happen in the spotlight. It happens in obscurity. The people who build things that last are the ones who stay committed while the world looks away. They keep showing up when the results are invisible. They execute consistently without needing to be reminded. And when the praise finally comes, they're already too deep in the next phase to stop and celebrate. That's how it should be. You don't chase applause, you chase improvement. You don't pause for approval, you move forward because the work matters. And ironically, it's this mindset that eventually earns the praise, not quickly, not loudly, but undeniably. Praise is reactive. It's not about what you're doing today, it's about what you've already finished, which means you must master the discipline of working without feedback. You must learn to trust your direction even when no one validates it, because the most meaningful work will be done without confirmation. People see what's finished. They don't see the thousands of quiet decisions that got you there, the long nights, the mornings you didn't skip, the things you said no to, the personal growth that had no audience. They only respond when it's all packaged, tested, and proven. Until then, you're just a name on the edge of their awareness. That's why waiting for recognition is a losing game. It keeps you stuck in performance mode. You start curating your process for attention instead of working toward mastery. You start measuring your progress based on likes, comments, and compliments, not actual growth, skill, or results. It's a trap, a subtle one, but it pulls many people off course. They chase applause before they've earned it. They mistake visibility for impact, and in doing so, they dilute their work. They choose speed over quality, performance over purpose, approval over alignment. Don't let that happen to you. Build your foundation in silence. Let your progress stay private, while it forms. Get good in the dark. Sharpen your edge without the crowd. That way, when the praise finally comes, it won't define you. It will just confirm what you already knew. Because you've been doing the work. You've been locked in. You've been building, refining, improving, long before the world cared. And when they finally care, you won't need the validation. You'll appreciate it, but you won't depend on it. That's what separates those who last from those who burn out the moment attention shifts. Public praise has never built anything lasting. It's a reward, not a requirement. It's a byproduct, not a foundation. If your mission is real, it must exist without applause. If your identity is rooted in purpose, recognition becomes optional. People don't cheer for you at the beginning. They don't clap when you're tired, when you're learning, when you're failing and trying again. They watch quietly. They doubt quietly. They scroll past your efforts with indifference, until one day the results become too obvious to ignore. Then they act like they were always in your corner. But that's not their fault. That's how people are wired. They follow finished stories, not unfolding ones. They respond to outcomes, not effort. They need to see it before they believe it. So show them, not with announcements, not with speeches, with undeniable consistency. Work until your results create a narrative they can't deny, until your discipline becomes your brand, until your excellence makes the applause inevitable. But by then, you'll be somewhere else mentally. You'll be deep into your next challenge, your next version. You won't be waiting for someone to say you're doing great, because you'll already be doing more. That's how real builders think. They don't pause for noise. They don't build for attention. They don't attach their identity to the timeline of public interest. They anchor themselves in process, and that process becomes their legacy. So if you're still in the phase where no one's watching, good. You're in the right place. That's where the real work lives. That's where the transformation happens. Not in the comments, not in the spotlight, but in the silent choices made again and again. And when the noise finally arrives, you'll be ready, not to celebrate, but to keep going. Because by the time they clap, you'll already be moving on to something greater. That's the standard. That's the path. Stay with it. Stay above the noise. Let your work speak when it's ready. When the praise finally comes, it's already late. You've moved forward, chasing something deeper than approval. But that's when the next trap appears. Quiet, subtle, dangerous. It doesn't scream. It doesn't demand. It whispers. It tells you to slow down, to ease off, to enjoy what you've earned. And it's so easy to believe. You've worked hard. You've stayed disciplined. You've made progress. But now comfort starts to feel justified, deserved. And if you're not careful, it becomes a cage that feels like safety. Comfort is not the enemy that announces itself. It doesn't feel like failure. It doesn't feel like quitting. That's what makes it so deceptive. Comfort is when you're doing just enough to avoid pain, but not enough to grow. When you're not failing, but you're not pushing either. When things are stable, but not evolving. It's dangerous because it doesn't demand urgency. It makes you feel secure while your edge begins to dull. You stop questioning your routines. You stop challenging your limits. You stop asking more from yourself. And over time you convince yourself that this is enough. But enough is a moving target. What feels stable today becomes stagnant tomorrow. What once felt like a milestone slowly turns into a ceiling. And the longer you stay in that space, the harder it is to leave. Because comfort rewires your expectations. It lowers your resistance to excuses. It softens your standards without you noticing. You begin justifying delay. You say you're taking a break. You say you'll get back to it next week. You say you need more time. But weeks turn into months. Progress slows. And before you realize what's happened, you've built a routine that no longer challenges you. You're busy, but not advancing. Productive, but not evolving. This kind of comfort is more dangerous than being completely lost, because when you're lost, at least you're searching. You're uncomfortable. You're moving. But when you're slightly comfortable, you stop moving entirely, and you don't notice. The worst part is that comfort doesn't always feel wrong. It often feels like peace, like stability, like rest. And yes, rest has value. But comfort that stretches into routine becomes complacency. It becomes the silent killer of urgency, of growth, of progress. You don't need to suffer to grow, but you do need to stretch. You need discomfort. You need pressure, not to break you, but to sharpen you. Pressure reveals where your limits are. Comfort hides them. That's why you must regularly disrupt your own rhythm. Introduce new challenges, set higher standards, redefine what progress means. The second your routines become easy, you must question whether they're still useful. Success has a way of seducing you into stalling. You look at what you've done and feel proud, and you should. But pride without pressure turns into protection. You begin guarding your past instead of building your future. If you want to keep growing, you have to keep moving beyond what you've already proven. You have to avoid the comfort of recycled effort. Doing what you've always done may keep you afloat, but it won't move you forward. You must resist the temptation to settle into the identity you've already built. Your past results are not permanent protection, they're temporary rewards, and they can become outdated fast if you stop developing. Staying uncomfortable doesn't mean chaos. It means intention. It means living with a level of pressure that keeps you awake. It means refusing to be lulled into passivity by your own progress. You need to ask harder questions. What are you avoiding? What are you tolerating that you would never have accepted before? What used to scare you that now feels too easy? Those questions reveal where comfort has crept in. The difficult part is that comfort is praised by society. People tell you to relax, to enjoy, to slow down, and there's a time for that. But not when you're still building, not when there's more inside you, not when your purpose hasn't been fully expressed. You can enjoy the process, but you cannot let enjoyment replace hunger, because hunger is what drives creativity. Hunger is what fuels resilience. Hunger keeps you moving when logic tells you to stop. Comfort erases that hunger, one quiet day at a time. You don't need a crisis to grow. You need clarity. You need to remember why you started. What made you push in the beginning? What scared you? What inspired you? And then you need to return to the kind of mindset that demands evolution. That may mean leaving environments that keep you small, that reward you for being average, that applaud your comfort instead of calling you higher. Not out of arrogance, but because alignment matters. If you're surrounded by people who fear discomfort, you'll absorb that fear. You need pressure to stay sharp, the kind of pressure that forces new solutions, new strategies, new standards. You don't outgrow the need for pressure. You just learn how to use it better. Comfort tells you to protect what you have. Growth tells you to expand it. And expansion always involves risk. The risk of falling short, the risk of being misunderstood, the risk of starting over. But those risks are where the next level lives. Comfort will never take you there. If you want more, you have to want the discomfort that comes with it. You have to want the longer hours, the harder choices, the quieter sacrifices. You have to want growth more than convenience. Because at the highest level, growth isn't an accident. It's a decision. A deliberate move away from ease and toward challenge. A constant recalibration of what's possible. You are never finished refining. The moment you stop evolving is the moment your results stop progressing. So choose discomfort. Choose the next level. Choose to live just beyond what feels safe. Not because you hate comfort, but because you refuse to be trapped by it. The comfort of being accepted is one of the last barriers to break. It holds you in place by making everything feel okay. You're not in pain. You're not falling behind. People like you. They respect you. They appreciate you. But under that approval, growth begins to slow. You start choosing what's safe. You pick what will be received well instead of what will push the edge. And that's when greatness slips away. Quietly, politely, without resistance. Because being liked is easy. Being great is not. Approval feels good. It creates temporary peace. But peace without progress becomes a trap. You get used to praise. You build for reaction. You start measuring your value by the number of people clapping. That attention starts to shape your choices. You pull back your voice. You round off your edges. You give just enough to stay popular, not enough to stand out. You don't even notice it at first. It starts as harmless self-awareness. You want to be helpful. You don't want to offend. You soften your words. You avoid conflict. But over time, you're no longer telling the truth. You're performing. You're filtering everything through the question, will they like this? And that question is the first step away from excellence. Because excellence is polarizing. It draws a line. It separates. It demands you commit to a direction that not everyone will follow. It asks you to speak clearly, act decisively, and pursue mastery over popularity. And that makes people uncomfortable. Most don't want you to grow too fast. They like you where you are, accessible, agreeable, similar. But greatness requires you to break out of that box. It asks you to prioritize your purpose over their comfort. And when you do, some people will leave. That's the cost. And it's a price many aren't willing to pay. That's why being liked becomes addictive. It protects you from rejection. It keeps you from standing out too far. It keeps you soft, smooth, and easy to digest. But you were not made to be easy. You were made to be excellent. And excellence requires risk. The risk of being misunderstood. The risk of being called difficult. The risk of being labeled arrogant, obsessed, or too much. These are the names people give to those who step away from group approval. If you want to do something rare, you must let go of your need to be liked. Not because being disliked is noble, but because approval is not a reliable compass. It changes with trends. It shifts with moods. It turns on you when you grow too fast. When you start doing things that others haven't done, they may resist. Not always because they hate what you're doing, but because it reflects what they haven't done. Your intensity exposes their avoidance. Your progress challenges their comfort. So they criticize, not always directly. Sometimes it comes in small remarks, jokes about how serious you've become, comments about how you've changed, questions masked as concern, and all of it is meant to pull you back into something more palatable. But if you want greatness, you must resist that pull. You must let go of the need to be palatable. Because the pursuit of something extraordinary rarely fits within the boundaries of social ease. This doesn't mean you should be rude or arrogant. It means you should be anchored, grounded in something so real that you don't shift to match every reaction. Because if you're always adjusting your path to stay accepted, you'll never follow the one that leads to greatness. The truth is, many people lose their potential not from failure, but from dilution. They watered themselves down for approval. They chose applause over clarity. They sacrificed power for peace. And in doing so, they stayed liked, but never became great. You must build your character so strong that you can survive disapproval, that you can keep your vision even when people don't understand it, that you can walk into a room and not need everyone's head to nod for you to feel stable. This is not easy. Approval is a drug. It lights up your brain. It makes you feel seen, but it fades quickly. And when it becomes your fuel, you're forced to chase it endlessly. Excellence is the withdrawal. It is the decision to stop seeking short-term validation in exchange for long-term impact. It feels like isolation. It feels like resistance. But it's the only way to access your highest capacity. You can't build something legendary if your choices are based on audience response. You have to be willing to keep showing up, even when the room is quiet, even when people question your methods, even when the crowd moves on. Because the deeper you go, the smaller the crowd becomes, but the greater the output. That's the trade. If you're trying to reach everyone, you will lose the precision needed to create something remarkable. But if you focus, if you let go of pleasing the crowd, you can build something that defines your life. And ironically, once you do, the applause comes back. People eventually circle around when the results are too strong to ignore. But by then, you don't need the approval, because you've already built without it. And that's the point. You must stop needing what you're trying to earn. Only then are you free to create it. You have to understand that being liked is conditional. It's often tied to expectations, habits, and roles that people have assigned to you. The moment you step out of that assignment, you break the agreement, and they may not like the new version of you. Let them adjust. You are not responsible for managing their reaction. You are responsible for pursuing what is real, what is necessary, what is yours. Let your purpose speak louder than your need to be approved. Let your growth guide you even when it distances you from the crowd. Let your truth sit in silence long enough to become undeniable. You don't have to be disliked, but you do have to be clear. Clear enough that you don't hide parts of yourself just to keep the peace. Clear enough that you're willing to be misunderstood on the path to being unshakable. Because being liked might keep you popular, but it will not make you powerful. That comes from choosing excellence every time, even when it costs you applause, even when it leaves you walking alone, even when it's hard to explain. You are not here to fit in. You are here to become the fullest version of who you were meant to be, and that version may not be accepted by everyone. That's the price of greatness and the freedom of letting go. Letting go of the need to be liked is one of the hardest shifts. It forces you to lead without approval, to move without applause, and to keep going even when nobody understands your choices. But there's another shift, just as important, one that carries you when every external reason to continue is gone. It's the decision to keep showing up regardless of outcomes, validation, or ease. This is where people begin to confuse greatness with luck. They see the result, not the effort. They notice the breakthrough, not the years before it. But the truth is simple. Winners aren't lucky. They're relentless. People love to romanticize success. They tell stories of talent, timing, and overnight momentum. But those stories leave out what matters most. The days no one saw, the weeks when nothing worked, the years of building with no spotlight. Every major win you've seen came after a long period of being ignored, underestimated, or unnoticed. What changed wasn't the person's worth. It was the world finally catching up to what had already been built. Relentlessness isn't just about hard work. It's about consistency under pressure. It's doing the work again and again, even after it stops being exciting. It's getting up after failure, again and again, without needing a reason beyond the goal itself. It's repeating your process when no one responds, and adjusting when it still doesn't work. Winners don't stop when things get slow. They don't slow down when their effort isn't immediately rewarded. They learn, adapt, refine, but they never stop moving. That movement becomes momentum, and over time, momentum becomes mastery. Persistence is unglamorous. It lacks excitement. There are no medals for showing up quietly. There are no headlines for discipline. But that is where real success is built, in the dull hours, in the decisions that no one celebrates. In the early mornings when quitting would feel easier than pushing. Most people aren't defeated by failure. They're defeated by repetition. The repetition of trying and seeing nothing, of pushing and feeling like it doesn't matter, of being disciplined without seeing results. That's where people give up. Not because they can't do the work, but because they think the work isn't working. Relentless people understand something others miss. Results come on their own timeline. You don't control when, you only control whether. Whether you keep going, whether you keep believing, whether you show up today like it's day one. Because relentlessness is not about emotion, it's about commitment. You can be exhausted and still be relentless. You can be doubtful and still take action. You can have no motivation and still follow through. That kind of consistency is misunderstood. People call it obsessive. They call it intense. But the truth is, it's focused. It's what happens when you're more connected to your outcome than your discomfort. You stop needing short-term relief. You start playing a longer game. And in that game, everything is earned. There is no shortcut, no lucky break, just a slow build that one day becomes undeniable. But that moment only arrives for the ones who stayed long enough to reach it. The ones who didn't need recognition to keep going. The ones who didn't collapse after failure. The ones who learned from losses instead of using them as reasons to stop. That's not talent. That's not luck. That's resilience. And resilience repeated becomes relentlessness. If you want to win at anything that matters, you must let go of the idea that things should happen quickly, that progress will be obvious, that breakthroughs are guaranteed. They're not. But showing up is. It's the one piece you control, and that means showing up without signs, without signals, without applause. Showing up because you said you would, because you know what happens if you stop, because you're building something bigger than your current mood. Most of the time, there won't be a clear marker that you're on the right path. You'll feel like nothing is moving. You'll question your decisions. You'll wonder if your time would be better spent elsewhere. But if the vision is still real, if the goal still matters, then you already have your answer. Keep going. Relentlessness is not about feeling inspired. It's about honoring the work when inspiration is gone. This mindset changes everything. It removes the pressure to always feel good. It breaks the illusion that motivation is required. It replaces emotion with execution. You stop managing how you feel and start measuring what you've done. And the more you do that, the more your standard rises. The gap between your good days and bad days gets smaller. You stop collapsing under stress. You build a system strong enough to keep moving, even when the wind turns against you. People will say you got lucky. That's how they explain what they can't replicate. They see the surface, not the structure. But deep down, you'll know. You'll know it came from thousands of unseen hours, from choosing persistence over performance, from staying grounded when others drifted. That's why relentlessness must become your foundation, because every goal worth chasing will demand more time than you expect. It will test your patience. It will make you question your pace. It will stretch you without warning. If your foundation is made of desire, you'll burn out. If it's built on approval, you'll freeze when it fades. But if it's rooted in discipline, built through repetition and held up by commitment, you'll outlast every excuse. And that's the real win, not just reaching the goal, but becoming someone who no longer needs the world to believe in them to keep moving forward. That kind of strength builds confidence you can trust. Not a temporary confidence that comes from progress, but a durable one that grows from persistence. You stop needing to see results to know you're growing. You start trusting the process instead of rushing it. And when results do come, they don't change you. They just reflect what you already became in silence. That's why winners don't stop when things get quiet. That's why they aren't distracted by setbacks. They know that every single day they stay in the game, they're creating compound results, not just in outcomes, but in character. They're becoming more focused, more adaptable, more resilient. And when the moment finally comes that people call them successful, it won't feel surprising. It'll feel earned, because they've been winning long before anyone noticed. So forget lucky, build relentless, and don't stop. Not when it gets hard, not when it gets boring, not when no one notices. Because if you keep showing up, day after day, version after version, rep after rep, there's no outcome you can't reach. Not through luck, through consistency, through commitment, through the quiet, steady decision to never stop. Staying relentless without applause is a skill. Doing the work over and over without recognition builds something stronger than motivation. It builds identity. But there's another layer few are ready for. It's not just doing the work without praise. It's building something meaningful when no one believes in it. When people don't understand what you're doing, when they doubt your direction, when they quietly expect you to quit. You must build anyway. Most people wait. They wait until they feel seen. They wait for the green light of approval. They wait for someone to confirm that they're on the right path. But the truth is, those lights rarely appear early. Support from others usually arrives late, after the risk has been taken, after the groundwork has been laid, after the visible progress becomes undeniable. If you build only when others approve, you will never build anything original. You'll shape your ideas to fit what's accepted. You'll limit your vision to what others can already understand. And you'll trap your potential inside the boundaries of other people's comfort. Belief from others is often conditional. It depends on what they see, what they've experienced, and what they're used to. Most people don't believe in what they've never seen. They don't know how to support something new until it becomes successful. That's not because they don't care. It's because their understanding is shaped by evidence. But if you're trying to do something different, something personal, something bold, something that hasn't been proven yet, there won't be evidence. Not at first, not until you create it. That's why you can't wait for permission to start. You must be the first one to believe, not in the outcome, but in the necessity of the process. You must believe that your time matters, even if no one's watching. That your effort has value, even if no one agrees yet. That what you're building is worth it, because you said it is. This kind of internal belief is quiet. It doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up every day in decisions, in movement, in persistence. It's not about convincing others. It's about refusing to need their agreement. You will be doubted. That's part of the path. People will offer advice that's not aligned. They'll tell you to wait, to pivot, to choose something safer, not because they want to harm you, but because your commitment challenges them. It reflects what they've avoided in their own lives, and they project their fear onto your ambition. You cannot internalize that, because the moment you let doubt from others shape your actions, you begin to shrink. You start filtering your steps, you lose momentum, and you stop trusting yourself. Building without belief from others is hard. It's lonely. It feels like you're moving through fog. But that fog is where most people stop, and where those who succeed keep going. The ones who make it out are the ones who learned how to carry their own conviction when no one else would. That's what makes your foundation unbreakable, because once you've built something without support, no one can take it from you. You didn't borrow belief. You created your own. That becomes permanent. And when the belief finally arrives, when people start noticing, when they finally say, "I always knew," you'll know the truth. They didn't. They believed when it was easy. You believed when it was hard. That's what makes your progress different. Most people only see the finished product. They don't see the sacrifices, the discipline, the days when you wanted to quit, the moments you questioned everything but still kept going. They see momentum. They don't see the years it took to create it. If you wait for belief to come before you build, you'll be stuck at the starting line forever. You'll talk about your vision but never act on it. You'll plan more than you execute. You'll hesitate, and that hesitation will steal your potential. The truth is, your first version won't be perfect. It won't be impressive. People might mock it. They might ignore it. But the point isn't to impress. It's to begin. The first version isn't for them. It's for you. It's proof that you moved, that you took control of your direction. Belief follows evidence. That means you must create the first piece of evidence alone. You don't need to convince everyone. You need to take action so clearly, so consistently, that the results become undeniable. Then belief arrives. Then people start adjusting their perspective. But never expect them to see the vision before you do the work. That's your responsibility. So stop seeking agreement. Stop explaining your plan in hopes of gaining support. Stop hoping that your confidence will be borrowed from someone else's reaction. It won't, and it shouldn't. You're not here to be validated. You're here to create. And creation, by nature, starts in silence. It starts before applause, before praise, before traction. That's where most people stop, because it feels unfair. Why work hard when no one cares yet? Why build when no one is cheering? Because it matters. Because what you build in silence becomes the proof the world needs. And without it, they'll never understand. But once you create it, everything changes. Suddenly, people ask how you did it. Suddenly, they want to help. They want to be part of it. They see your vision, because now they see the result. That's the pattern, and you must learn to accept it, not resent it. Use it. Let their disbelief push you. Let their silence sharpen your focus. Let their doubt remind you that you are not doing this for them. You're doing it because you cannot live any other way. Because the idea, the mission, the goal, it chose you. And your job is to honor that, no matter how long it takes for others to recognize it. Every hour you build without applause strengthens your self-trust. Every win you create in private makes the public ones more stable. Every small step you take in isolation prepares you for the momentum to come, because it will come. But only if you build when it's hardest, when it's quiet, when it feels like no one sees you. That's when the real work happens. That's when the foundations are poured. That's when your future becomes real. So keep going, not because they believe, but because you do. Believing in yourself when no one else does is the beginning. That quiet confidence becomes your foundation. But once you start building, once you start creating with consistency and vision, another truth becomes impossible to ignore. No one owes you attention. No matter how pure your intentions are, no matter how much effort you put in, the world does not hand out platforms for trying. You must earn them through value. Many people confuse potential with permission. They think that having something to say means they deserve an audience. But platforms aren't awarded for ideas. They're earned through execution, through proof, through value so clear that people can't look away. You can't demand to be heard just because you're passionate. Everyone is passionate about something. What separates those who speak from those who are listened to is simple. Results. Not feelings, not hope, but consistent, undeniable output. You're not owed attention. You're not owed followers, subscribers, clients, respect, or influence. The world is overwhelmed with voices. Everyone is talking. Everyone is trying to be seen. The only ones who rise are the ones who produce something people need, want, or can't ignore. That means the first step is not visibility. It's usefulness. Not likes, but leverage. You create value that solves a problem, fills a gap, or pushes people forward. And you keep doing that until your presence can no longer be denied. You earn your platform through discipline, by showing up when others fade, by doing the work when it's boring, by improving when no one's watching. And over time, that work compounds into trust. Not just from your audience, but from yourself. You begin to speak differently when you've earned your voice. You don't need to yell. You don't have to force engagement. Your value makes the case for you. You don't chase attention. You build something that attention finds. And if it hasn't found you yet, it's not because the world is unfair. It's because you haven't built enough yet. That's not an insult. That's a call to action. If you want to be seen, then create something that deserves to be seen. If you want to be respected, then offer something that earns respect. If you want your work to spread, then make it too good to ignore. This doesn't mean being perfect. It means being relentless. Every day you show up and build is a deposit into your platform, not a platform handed to you, but one you lay brick by brick, quietly, patiently, relentlessly. A platform is not a microphone. It's a mirror. It reflects the strength of what you've built behind the scenes. It doesn't amplify your hopes. It echoes your results. That means you must stop obsessing over growth, reach, or visibility if you haven't yet built something solid. Focus on the work, the product, the message, the skill, the craft. Because if that part is weak, no amount of visibility will help. Being seen too early can ruin you. Visibility without value creates pressure without foundation. The spotlight can expose cracks. If your message isn't grounded, your growth becomes fragile. That's why you must be ready before you ask to be noticed. When you've put in the work, when your message is built on truth, when your product is excellent, you won't need to beg for attention. People will come to you, slowly at first, then all at once. That's the part most people miss. They want the outcome without the input. They want the platform without the patience. But speed doesn't replace strength. Fast growth without preparation collapses under pressure. So build the thing first, the business, the message, the art, the skill, then refine it, then earn the right to speak. And this applies to every area of life. If you want a voice in a room, bring solutions. If you want influence in a space, deliver results. If you want to lead, serve first. Leadership, recognition, trust. None of these are given freely. They are rented daily through performance. The price is consistency. The contract is long-term. And the results must speak before you do. You are not entitled to a stage just because you want one. You must bring something people value enough to stop what they're doing and pay attention. That's the exchange. That's the only deal that lasts. Stop trying to be discovered. Start building something that makes discovery a formality. The internet makes it look easy. Social media tells you everyone is famous. But attention is not the same as trust. Noise is not the same as authority. Going viral is not the same as building something that matters. Your goal should not be reach. It should be resonance. Can you create something that moves people, that shifts their thinking, that solves a problem so effectively they remember your name? That kind of impact earns its platform. Everything else is temporary. You don't need millions of people to start. You need 10 people who are changed by your work, then 20, then 50. And from there, growth becomes organic, not because you begged for it, but because you earned it. If your voice hasn't reached the level you want, ask better questions. What am I building? Who is it helping? Is it excellent? Is it consistent? Would I follow myself if I were a stranger? Those questions bring clarity. They put you back in control. They remind you that platforms are not given. They are grown from the ground up. And once you earn it, once you build something real, you won't feel the need to chase approval. You'll speak with calm. You'll lead with proof. You'll move with weight. So don't focus on the noise. Focus on the bricks. Lay them, align them, stack them with care, and let your work earn the right to be heard. That's the path. Quiet now, loud later, always earned, never owed. Earning a platform through value puts the responsibility exactly where it belongs, on your effort, your consistency, and your ability to solve real problems. It's not about who gives you permission. It's about what you've built that commands attention. But when that attention doesn't come, when the results take longer than expected, frustration often begins to build. Not always loudly, sometimes quietly. It shows up as doubt, bitterness, and subtle anger toward the world. But beneath all that noise is one clear message. Resentment is a symptom of inaction. Resentment doesn't appear when you're moving. It appears when you're stuck. It feeds on comparison, on unmet expectations, and on stories we tell ourselves to justify why things aren't happening fast enough. Instead of asking better questions or adjusting strategy, many people start blaming. They blame the algorithm, the economy, the audience, the market, the timing, and eventually themselves. But at its core, resentment doesn't mean the world is unfair. It means the work isn't being done at the level it needs to be. The gap between where you are and where you want to be is not always closed by talent. It's closed by deliberate, repeated action. When that action stalls, frustration grows, and the longer you stay inactive, the more likely you are to shift the blame outward. It's easier to say no one's listening than to accept that you haven't said something worth hearing yet. It's easier to point to other people's opportunities than to face the truth that your current habits don't match your ambition. The world doesn't ignore excellence. It's not always immediate, but over time, consistent value becomes impossible to overlook. If no one is noticing your work, it doesn't mean you're worthless. It means you haven't yet done enough to be undeniable. That realization stings, but it also gives you back your power, because now the path forward is clear. The problem with resentment is that it keeps you focused on the wrong thing. It locks your attention on external factors and distracts you from what you can actually control. You start thinking like a victim instead of a builder. You spend more time explaining why it hasn't worked than doing the work required to change that reality. If you're bitter at the lack of recognition, ask yourself what, specifically, you've created that's worth recognizing. How many hours have you spent improving your skill? How many real problems have you solved for other people? How much of your effort has been strategic instead of scattered? These questions can be uncomfortable, but they cut through illusion. They stop you from pretending that effort always equals impact. They force you to acknowledge that some days the work isn't enough, not because it's unfair, but because it's incomplete. Action doesn't just mean movement. It means targeted movement. It means you're not only doing the work, but also refining your process, challenging your own blind spots, and actively seeking growth. Complaining is easy. Adapting is hard. But only one changes your position. The more you work, the less time you have to resent. Because real work takes your focus. It pulls your mind toward progress and away from entitlement. You don't have time to feel bitter when you're building. You don't feel ignored when you're improving. You're too busy moving. Resentment begins to dissolve the moment you accept full ownership of your path. That doesn't mean blaming yourself. It means empowering yourself. It means seeing every result as a reflection of effort and direction. And if something isn't working, you pivot instead of protest. This isn't about hustle culture or burning yourself out. It's about recognizing when your expectations have outpaced your execution. When you've demanded outcomes without doing the work that earns them. When you've looked outward for answers to problems that require internal clarity. You can't complain your way into growth. You can't guilt the world into caring. You can't make progress through passive frustration. You have to do something about it. And that starts with movement. Deliberate, uncomfortable, often invisible movement. Build something better than the emotion you're feeling. That's the only way out. Let the frustration fuel better habits. Let the bitterness remind you that it's time to level up, not lash out. Let the silence sharpen your focus instead of souring your mindset. No one owes you support just because you've struggled. Struggle is part of it. Everyone faces resistance. Everyone faces rejection. Everyone questions themselves at some point. What separates those who rise is their ability to respond to that pressure with action, not resentment. If you're watching others succeed and wondering why it's not happening for you, look closely at what they're doing when no one's watching. Most success is built in moments that are never documented. Most wins are the result of daily effort that felt invisible for years. If you've only been working publicly, you're missing the point. The real test is what you do in silence. Not what you post, not what you say, but what you build when no one is clapping. If you're focused on applause, you'll become resentful the moment it disappears. But if you're focused on mastery, on solving problems, on bringing real value, the applause becomes irrelevant. And when recognition does come, it won't matter the same way. You won't need it to feel valid. You'll already know the weight of what you've built. You'll understand that every compliment is just a reflection of effort that's been compounded over time. That's the mindset shift, from deserving to delivering, from entitlement to execution, from blame to building. If resentment is showing up in your thoughts, trace it to its source. What have you stopped doing? What have you avoided improving? What have you delayed, excused, or ignored? Resentment is not your enemy. It's a signal, a warning light that something within you is not being honored. Use it. Let it point you back to the work. Let it remind you that action cures most emotional noise, because once you start building again, seriously, consistently, relentlessly, the resentment begins to lose its grip. You stop needing the world to respond because your own momentum becomes enough. You stop looking sideways and start looking forward, and that shift gives you back your freedom. Blame keeps you trapped. Responsibility sets you free. The sooner you move, the faster that bitterness fades. You replace complaints with results. You replace emotion with action. You replace judgment with clarity. And clarity leads to progress. So, if you're tired of feeling stuck, don't wait to feel better. Move, start, build. That's how the story changes, not through reaction, but through responsibility. Not through noise, but through movement. Not through resentment, but through relentless execution. When resentment fades through action and ownership replaces blame, something shifts. You stop reacting and start responding. You begin to move forward, not because the world changed, but because you did. But then the real pressure begins. Progress brings problems. Movement brings resistance. And as you push forward with intention, obstacles appear, slowly at first, then all at once. This is the moment most people misread. They take it as a sign to stop, to pause, to retreat. But the truth is far more exact. Adversity is the filter that decides who is serious. Difficulty isn't always a warning. Often, it's a question. How bad do you want it? Will you keep moving when the path isn't clear? Can you hold your pace when the ground shifts beneath your feet? These are not punishments. They are checkpoints, built-in tests that separate those who say they want something from those who actually do. Adversity doesn't care about intentions. It reveals habits. You can plan, dream, prepare, and train. But when pressure hits, your default behavior takes over. If your habits are built on convenience, you will collapse. If they are built on consistency, you will hold. This is where commitment is proven. Not in comfort, but in crisis. When resources run thin, when time runs out, when support disappears and nothing is working, that's when the truth surfaces. Most people fold, not because they lack talent, but because they never prepared for resistance. They expected progress to feel fair. But growth has no interest in fairness. It only answers effort. There is no such thing as a smooth climb. Every path worth walking comes with friction. That friction is not your enemy. It is your measurement. If you can only operate when things are easy, your results will stay shallow. The deeper your ambition, the more resistance you will face. And that resistance exists for a reason. It teaches you to adjust. It makes you creative. It breaks the part of you that expected everything to go your way. It sharpens your discipline. It strips away your ego. Adversity does not just test you, it prepares you. Every setback is a classroom. If you avoid it, you delay your own evolution. But if you face it, if you stay with it, something happens. You develop endurance, not just physically, but mentally. You stop reacting emotionally to every delay. You stop assuming difficulty means you're off course. Instead, you begin to trust the struggle. You recognize that adversity is not trying to destroy you, it's trying to refine you. It's showing you where you're still weak, where your plan needs work, where your mindset still cracks under weight. This awareness is uncomfortable, but it is necessary, because when you push through resistance and keep showing up, you build confidence that no compliment could ever give you. You stop needing reassurance. You stop looking for signs. Your actions become the proof. The people who win are not always the most skilled. They are the ones who stay in the game longest, the ones who endure the friction and come out sharper, the ones who fall but don't exit, who bend but don't break. They earn their results not through luck, but through stamina. They understand that setbacks are not full stops. They are signals to adjust, to recalibrate, to level up. Because if you cannot perform in adversity, you will not be trusted with bigger stages. More responsibility doesn't come with less pressure, it comes with more. And unless you've proven that you can operate under strain, you won't sustain that next level. Growth demands discomfort. It doesn't ask if you're ready. It shows up without warning and watches your reaction. If you complain, you restart the lesson. If you adjust, you graduate. The commitment to keep going, especially when it makes no sense, is rare. But that's what makes it valuable. Anyone can move when the road is smooth. Few keep going when it's blocked. And that is why adversity filters. It exposes the difference between interest and investment, between trying and committing, between liking the idea and living the process. If you only show up when things go your way, you will not last. But if you learn to expect resistance and plan for it and work through it without losing your grip, you will separate yourself, not just in performance, but in durability. Durability is not about never being hurt. It's about continuing in spite of it. It's about holding your direction when everything around you begs for retreat. And when others fall back, you hold your ground. Not because you're invincible, but because you're anchored. Anchored in purpose, anchored in vision, anchored in a commitment that wasn't made for comfort. This commitment is not built through inspiration, it is built through repetition. Every day you choose to work through resistance is a deposit into a deeper identity, one that does not quit, one that does not lower the standard to match the pressure. This identity can't be given to you, it must be forged, and forging only happens under heat, under stress. In the moments when everything inside you says stop and you keep moving anyway, that's when it counts most. Not when it's convenient, when it's costly. Adversity sharpens you or it softens you. You choose how it shapes you. That choice is made every day, in your responses, in your actions, in your mindset. You cannot avoid resistance. You can only train for it. And every challenge you face is an opportunity to become unshakable, not just in your skill, but in your focus, in your ability to hold your line, stay in the process, and keep pressing forward without waiting for it to get easier. If it never gets easier, can you still continue? That is the test. And that test repeats itself at every level. Success does not eliminate adversity. It invites more. But now you know how to handle it. You've faced storms before. You've stayed standing. And each time you do, you earn more than a result. You earn trust in yourself. That trust carries more weight than any shortcut. It becomes the foundation for everything that follows. It tells you clearly that no matter what shows up, you are capable of handling it. Not because life is smooth, but because you are steady. This is the reward of adversity, not ease, but strength, not relief, but readiness. So when the pressure builds, don't run. Don't wish it away. Don't resent it. face it, welcome it, let it show you who you are. Because if you're still standing, still building, still becoming, then you've passed the test. And if not, that test will be waiting until you're ready. If adversity reveals who's serious, then consistency proves who's unstoppable. It's not enough to survive the hard days. You have to keep showing up on the days when no one's watching, when nothing is urgent, and when no one is counting on you. That's where the separation happens. Not in public, not under lights, but behind closed doors, when it's just you, your standards, and your willingness to go again. Most people look for the moment to shine. They want to be seen, praised, celebrated. But the real advantage is built in silence. It comes from stacking effort without needing recognition. It comes from building endurance by doing the same task better every time, especially when no one will notice the difference but you. Consistency looks boring. It doesn't trend, it doesn't go viral, but it works. Because while others chase momentum, you're building structure. While others wait for motivation, you're refining systems. While others perform when eyes are on them, you're performing when the room is empty. And over time, the difference becomes impossible to ignore. You don't outshine people by doing more once in a while. You outperform them by doing the right thing more often, more precisely, and more reliably. That's how separation is built, quietly, over time, in the hours that don't feel dramatic. Charisma fades, excitement fades, but habits stay. And habits, repeated long enough, shape outcomes far more effectively than any burst of inspiration ever could. Everyone talks about doing the work. Few people actually do it every day. Even fewer do it when there's no payoff in sight. That's the filter. That's where winners are shaped. Not by doing more than others in public, but by refusing to do less when the spotlight is gone. Outworking everyone doesn't mean burning yourself out. It means setting a standard so high that skipping becomes unacceptable, not because someone is holding you accountable, but because you refuse to let yourself fall behind. That self-regulated effort is what builds momentum that compounds. You don't need to make noise. You need to make progress. And progress is not built on grand gestures. It's built on daily choices. Showing up early, staying a little longer, fixing what's broken, practicing what's weak, saying no to distractions that others justify. People will call it obsessive. They'll say you need balance. But balance, when misunderstood, becomes stagnation. You are not meant to move like everyone else if you're trying to reach something uncommon. Your rhythm must reflect your goals. And if those goals require you to outpace everyone else, then your schedule has to look different. Your habits have to look different. Your discipline has to be higher. This doesn't mean being reckless. It means being intentional. You focus your time where it matters most. You eliminate what slows you down. You don't wait to feel ready. You move with urgency, not anxiety, because you know what's at stake. And when others pause, you keep building. When they rest in results, you raise your standard. When they coast on talent, you lean on repetition. This is how consistency creates distance, quietly, until it's undeniable. There's nothing glamorous about doing the same thing well for months or years. There's nothing exciting about refining your weaknesses until they become invisible. But that's where transformation happens. Not in breakthroughs, but in repetition that no longer needs recognition to continue. That's why consistency outperforms talent. Talent without structure is unpredictable, but discipline without applause creates durability, and durability always wins in the long run. You don't need to announce how hard you work. You don't need to post every improvement. Let people sleep on your progress. Let them forget your name. The work will speak for you when the time is right. You're not working to be noticed. You're working to be undeniable. That shift changes everything. It takes your attention off the audience and puts it on the assignment. It turns performance into process, and it frees you from the highs and lows of external validation. There's power in knowing that you are building something that no one sees yet. There's clarity in knowing that, while others get distracted, your direction is locked in. Consistency is not about perfection. It's about momentum, even on bad days, even through setbacks. You don't lose ground because your pace is steady. That steady pace adds up. It becomes a wall others can't climb, not because you moved faster, but because you never stopped. That's what it means to outwork everyone. It's not about the hours. It's about what you do inside them. It's not about noise. It's about depth. It's not about who's watching. It's about what gets done. And when the world starts paying attention, when the spotlight finally arrives, you'll be ready. Not because you trained for the stage, but because you've already been performing without one. The consistency that no one saw will become the skill that everyone respects. And the systems you built in silence will become the foundation that supports every new level. So stop measuring your success by applause. Start measuring it by execution. Did you follow through? Did you keep your promise to yourself? Did you maintain your standard even when no one asked? Those are the metrics that matter. Consistency will never feel exciting in the moment. But months from now, when others are scrambling to catch up, you'll be calm. Not because you're smarter, but because you stayed ready. That's the real advantage. Quiet repetition, steady improvement, relentless action that doesn't need permission. And that advantage belongs to the one who works when no one's watching, the one who keeps showing up, not because it's easy, but because it's required. So keep your head down, do the work, outwork them, not to be praised, but to be prepared. Because the day will come when all the hidden hours matter. And when it does, you won't need to prove anything. You'll already be ahead. When quiet consistency builds strength behind the scenes, it lays a foundation no spotlight can replace. There's nothing glamorous about showing up every day, repeating your craft, fixing what others never notice. But that's the discipline that earns real leverage. Still, in a world driven by appearances, the temptation to skip the hard part is everywhere. People want to be seen before they've built. They chase exposure without execution, and that's where the message gets lost, because visibility without victory isn't power, it's vanity. Attention is cheap. Earning it isn't hard anymore. Anyone can post, go viral, gain followers, say something loud. But real impact isn't about how many people look at you, it's about what they see when they do. If your work can't hold their trust, if your skills can't back up the noise, that attention is fleeting. It disappears the moment the spotlight shifts to someone else. Chasing visibility too early is like shining a light on an unfinished product. It invites criticism before you're even ready. It puts pressure on performance before competence has been developed. And when people notice inconsistency, they don't forget. That memory becomes your reputation. And rebuilding trust is harder than building skill. It's easy to confuse attention with validation. But being noticed doesn't mean you're ready. It doesn't mean you're good. It just means people are watching. And that visibility creates expectations. If your work isn't strong enough to support those expectations, the exposure hurts more than it helps. The best work is developed in silence for a reason. Because excellence takes time. It requires mistakes, rework, and uncomfortable honesty. If you rush the process just to be seen, you sacrifice refinement for reaction, and the trade kills long-term potential. Victory is built on substance, on real effort that produces results. You can't fake mastery, you can't trick repetition. No algorithm can replace hard-earned skill, and the people who truly win are the ones who focus more on becoming effective than becoming popular. They don't post every movement. They don't talk about every idea. They protect their process until it's strong enough to stand on its own. When they do step into the light, their results speak for them. Their impact lasts longer than the trend cycle. Their work matters even after the attention fades. If you need people to look at you to feel valuable, you've already lost control of your path. You'll start making decisions for optics, not outcomes. You'll compromise precision for performance, and eventually you'll become known more for noise than for results. Visibility has a cost. It demands consistency. It exposes your weaknesses. It amplifies your flaws. That's why it must be earned, not granted. And earning it means putting in more work than anyone sees. It means rejecting shortcuts that offer exposure without improvement. It's not that being seen is wrong, it's that being seen too early makes growth harder. It builds pressure before resilience. And in that pressure, many break, not because they weren't capable, but because they weren't ready. Focus on building something people need, something useful, something that works when no one is watching. If it's good enough, people will come. Maybe not right away, maybe not loudly, but they will come. And when they do, they'll stay, not because you asked for attention, but because your work earned it. There's a reason the best in any field don't seek attention. They draw it, slowly, steadily, because their results leave no other option. The work becomes magnetic, and that kind of attraction is based on depth, not volume. The more you build in silence, the more prepared you are when the spotlight finds you. You don't panic, you don't perform, you just continue. Because the work that brought attention doesn't change under pressure. You're not surprised to be noticed. You're just continuing what you've been doing all along. That's how you avoid the trap of vanity. You build from value. You focus on becoming undeniable. And when your time comes, there's nothing left to prove, because everything speaks for itself. If you're still unseen, that's not a problem. It's a gift. Use it. Get better. Sharpen your edge. Learn to love obscurity while you build your strength. That silence is the space where greatness grows. Because when your skills are real, the world has no choice but to notice, and when they do, your victory will hold. Not because you were visible, but because you were ready. The pull toward visibility is real. It feels like momentum. It looks like progress. But until you've built something strong enough to sustain attention, all that visibility does is speed up exposure to your weaknesses. People start expecting answers. They assume your presence equals preparation, and when it doesn't, the same attention you chased turns into judgment. This is why the ones who last don't rush. They're not hiding, they're working. They're building the foundation that others will stand on for a moment and fall through. They're crafting substance before they ever seek recognition. That delay creates strength, because once the eyes arrive, their systems are already tested, their voice is already practiced, their product already delivers. No platform can save you from being unprepared. The world is saturated with attention, but starving for excellence. And the only thing that keeps you relevant after people notice you is what you've built beneath the surface. Not your personality, not your branding, your consistency, your competence, your clarity. When you skip the development phase, you put your future at risk. It feels like acceleration, but it's just exposure. And exposure without depth creates pressure you're not ready for. You begin performing instead of improving. You chase relevance instead of results. You rely on perception instead of proof. Visibility doesn't make you stronger. It magnifies who you already are. That's why it's not a milestone, it's a mirror. It reflects your preparation. And if you haven't done the work, the mirror will break you. Not because you weren't worthy, but because you were early. Winning means nothing if you can't keep it. And keeping it requires structure, not spotlight. It requires being so good at what you do that even if no one noticed, you'd keep doing it the same way. That discipline is rare, but it's the only path that doesn't rely on trends or approval. Competence is the long game. You build it through repetition, not reaction. You stay committed when the world isn't watching, so that when it does, you don't have to change your pace. You don't have to impress anyone. You just keep doing what works. And that kind of rhythm is where greatness grows, quietly, without needing to be dressed up or broadcasted. You must resist the urge to be seen before you're ready, not because you're hiding, but because you respect what you're building. You know it deserves time, precision, thought, and you're willing to give it that before asking for attention in return. It's not about hiding your work forever. It's about knowing the difference between readiness and restlessness, between needing validation and being prepared to deliver. If you're in the build phase, honor that phase, maximize it. Don't rush through it for metrics that won't hold your weight when things get real. Every moment spent building before being seen is leverage later. You'll walk into visibility with calm, not performance anxiety, not fear of being exposed, just steady movement, because you've already proven everything that matters to yourself. You won't need the crowd to clap. You won't need the numbers to motivate you. Your confidence won't come from reach. It will come from reality, what you've done when no one was watching. You become the person people want to follow, not because you asked, but because you earned it. Not through your image, through your impact. So if you find yourself craving visibility, pause. Ask better questions. Is your work ready to be tested? Can it hold under pressure? Can it deliver when it matters? If not, return to the process. Not with shame, with purpose. Because every round of improvement makes your future more stable. The audience will come. But when they do, make sure what you're offering is worth their time. Not flashy, not trending, real. That's how you earn attention that lasts. Not through tactics, but through truth. Not through presence, but through proof. And not through vanity, but through value. Let others chase noise. You chase depth. Let others perform. You prepare. Because when it's time to be seen, you won't just be visible. You'll be respected. Not for how you looked, but for what you built. And no one can take that away. So here it is, the truth most people won't say out loud. Your potential means nothing without proof. Your effort doesn't guarantee applause. Struggle is met with silence. Failure is judged until redemption, and belief from others only comes after you've built something real. You are replaceable until you become undeniable. Discipline outlasts motivation. Winning reshapes how they see you, but only if you earn it first. You can be right and still lose. Obsession isn't optional. Isolation isn't punishment. It's preparation. The world will not wait. It will forget the underdog who stayed down too long. Public praise lags behind real work. Comfort dulls urgency. Being liked won't make you great. And luck. No. Winners are relentless. They build when no one claps. They build when no one believes. They build with no audience because they know the platform isn't given. It's earned. You don't rise by demanding recognition. You rise by outworking everyone in silence, because in the end, visibility without victory is noise, and noise fades. Results don't. Now it's your turn. Drop a comment below and write these words. I don't need applause to stay committed. Let that be your declaration. Quiet, bold, focused. The world may not care yet, but you're not here for attention. You're here to win. And if this hit you where it counts, subscribe to the channel. This is not a place for easy answers. It's for people who build when it's hard, think clearly when it's quiet, and choose growth when it's uncomfortable. Stay disciplined, stay sharp, and we'll see you at the top, where the silence ends.